The old woman no longer had the warmth she'd shown when they first met, nor the faint, ailing encouragement she'd offered Neville. Having shed her fox fur coat and the decorative vulture from her hat, she looked as ordinary as any other grandmother. Only now did she seem to accept that she had an outstanding Auror son who had once brought endless glory to the Longbottom family. Yet for 12 years, both her son and daughter-in-law had been mentally gone. The group walked toward the closed ward in a heavy silence. Loren had expected a period of small talk after meeting the family, the kind of careful explanation a doctor gives before an operation. Treatment, risks, chances. There was none of that. After greeting Loren, Mrs. Longbottom's first words were an immediate, blunt request to begin. She did not ask whether they could be cured, what the risks were, or how confident he was. They arrived at the door marked Janus Thicky, where Healer Mellum, whom Loren had seen earlier, stood waiting. "Headmaster Dumbledore, Mrs. Longbottom," Mellum said. "The other patients in the ward have been moved. Only Frank and Alice remain inside. If—" She saw the weight in Mrs. Longbottom's face and let the hospital's usual formality slip into something gentler. "I hope everything goes well for you. I'll be in the room at the end of the hall. Call me anytime if you need anything." Mellum left quietly. Inside the closed ward, Lockhart's and the other beds were empty. Loren immediately spotted the two innermost beds. Frank Longbottom's face was pale and swollen, his eyes staring at the quilt. Alice's face was thin and haggard, her eyes bulging and her hair gone gray. The moment Alice saw Neville, her expression lit up. She fumbled in the bedside drawer, found a crumpled super bubble chewing gum wrapper, and handed it to him with a delighted "Mmm." She could no longer speak, using gestures she alone understood. Neville took the wrapper and held it tightly. Alice hummed happily as she sat back, her legs swinging. Mrs. Longbottom did not scold Neville as she once might have. She looked at her son and daughter-in-law for a long, brief moment, then turned to Loren with a face drained of everything but resolve. "I beg you, Mr. Morgan, I beg you." Dumbledore inclined his head toward Loren. "I have told her everything that can be told. Do as you think best." Stupefy. 2 red bolts of charm fire from Loren's wand sent the 2 patients under the blankets into a deep, peaceful unconscious. Dumbledore and Mrs. Longbottom stood back, their faces calm. Neville looked at Loren, startled. "Even if you don't ask, I should explain before we begin," Loren said, meeting Neville's eyes. "I'll use a mirror to open a passage into their consciousness. For me and you, it's an illusion. For them, it will be a dream. The illusion has 3 layers. I control the first 2. You must go alone into the third. No one knows what you'll find there. It's not life-threatening, but it's not guaranteed safe either." "I can do it," Neville said, looking up at Loren, still clutching the chewed wrapper. Mrs. Longbottom nodded slowly but firmly. "He is a son of the Longbottom family." With preparations complete, the ceremony began. Loren produced Bloody Mary's hand mirror and tapped the wand into its crimson surface, drawing out 3 threads of blood-colored light. Those threads extended to the foreheads of Neville, Frank, and Alice, linking them. A soft current of magic threaded into their souls, binding their consciousnesses. Neville blurred for a moment. The room spun. When his vision cleared, only he and Loren remained in the ward. Curtains covered the empty beds. The windows were half open. Sound had been swallowed. The ward felt hollow and wrong. Loren's voice cut through that silence. "Neville, Neville." Loren patted his shoulder to steady him. "This is the first layer, an echo of the space we're in. We need to go deeper." "What's the second layer? How do we get there?" Neville asked, the wrapper warm in his hand. The warmth steadied him. Loren didn't reply immediately. He walked to the thick stone ward door, placed a hand on it, and pushed. The heavy slab swung open with ease. Beyond it was not the 5th-floor hall of St. Mungo's, but a long, winding, cobbled street. Loren grinned. "Welcome to Diagon Alley." It was the same view that opens behind the Leaky Cauldron, a sunny, shop-lined street that led into the wizarding world. As they stepped through, the stone door instantly reshaped itself into a red brick wall, just like the Leaky Cauldron's. The street before them was empty of people. Even so, the window of Elop's Owl Emporium sounded as if wings beat inside. The place felt vivid and yet wrong. Loren used his magical sight to scan it. Crystal blue light, drifting crimson mist that formed shapes and then dissolved, currents of magic flowing like a river along the street. Neville's voice was small. How do we get to the third layer? Do we push a door? No door to push? Loren stepped briskly along Diagon Alley, through potages, past Madame Malkin's, Flourish and Blots, Ollivanders, Slug and Jiggers, until the street narrowed into a darker lane. The blood-colored mist flowed into that alley and disappeared, as if swallowed. I control the second layer. I made it Diagon Alley so it would be familiar. The third layer is different. It's your parents' own awareness. If I rush in, I could disturb it. They passed Gringotts with its bronze outer doors half open and a silver inner door bearing a warning. Enter, stranger, but take heed. The light from Diagon Alley couldn't penetrate the darkness beyond. Shadows seemed to writhe inside. You'll have to go the rest of the way alone, Loren said, stopping and turning to Neville. I don't know what waits in the third layer. You could face a dragon, a Death Eater, or even Lord Voldemort. No matter what, you must find your parents and bring them out. This is an illusion. It won't hurt your body, but sensations and pain will feel real. If it becomes too much. Will I become like my mom and dad? Neville asked flatly. No, you won't become like them. The worst that happens is this world collapses around you, Loren replied. Neville took a long breath and looked into the mouth of Nocturne Alley. Thank you, Loren, he said. When I come out, I'll buy you ice cream from Florian Fortescue's. Then he went in. The shadow swallowed him. In the great hall at Hogwarts, sunlight poured through the main doors and threw a diamond of gold across the flagstones. Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape watched a small black beetle beat its wings, shrink to a speck, and vanish. Frankly, I thought you'd be soft-hearted. She is, after all, Snape began. A top student in Transfiguration, McGonagall finished coolly. She had no great affection for Rita Skeeter. Sneaking about as an unregistered animagus, using enchanted transfiguration to spy, and then selling the gossip, Rita had crossed lines. Still, Dumbledore had offered a compromise. Rita would serve as an assistant in the animagus class, and for a year, travel to the United States to gather information for him. In return, they would keep her animagus identity secret. Snape remembered the beetle's attempt to fly off mid-lesson, pretending cooperation, then striking to escape. McGonagall had brought it down in 2 quick moves before the beetle could cause any real trouble. At the edge of the Forbidden Forest, a small witch vanished with a soft bang, leaving a hollow in the air that sucked the breeze in for a heartbeat. Hermione appeared in the center of a wooden hoop, fingers reaching up to touch her face. Right in the middle! She breathed, half laughing. Professor Flitwick stood beside her, beaming. The spellcasting was clean and the landing precise. Congratulations, Miss Granger. You have apparated. Thank you, Professor. Hermione's joy was bright and steady. Flitwick chuckled as he dismissed the hoop. Until you pass your qualification, do not use this magic openly. Misuse could cost you several hundred galleons in fines. I understand, she replied seriously. Then let's go back. Back in the closed ward, 4 figures lay on the beds. 2 adults in St. Mungo's gowns, and 2 younger wizards still in Hogwarts robes who had just been put down. Mrs. Longbottom stood looking at her son, daughter-in-law, and grandson, her face lined and deep with worry. Albus, she asked softly, do you think they can succeed? 262, a banquet for 13 people. Grandma Longbottom lowered her head and shielded her eyes. At the time, we were all swept up in the joy of victory. Voldemort was defeated, and peace seemed at hand. I remember that morning, Frank even told me we should celebrate. I complained about fate's injustice. Why my son and daughter-in-law? She continued, voice trembling. Why did it happen just as good days were coming? I'm so sorry, Augusta, Dumbledore said softly. If I had been more cautious back then, perhaps. No. Grandma Longbottom lifted her chin, her eyes slightly reddened. I am proud of them. They are Longbottoms, and until the very last moment, they didn't give anything away. Dumbledore stood silently by the window, the sunlight unable to reach him. Neville, he's always been a bit careless, forgetful as a child, she said, her gaze softening. We all thought he had no talent, almost thought he was a squib. The day he fell from that high building and bounced back, well, that was the happiest day I'd had in years. I gave him Frank's wand, hoping he would inherit his father's strength and make the Longbottom name proud again. Last year he wrote to me saying the wand didn't suit him. she went on. I knew a poor match would make him make mistakes, become a laughingstock. After he changed wands, he was more comfortable, his grades improved. Even an old muddlehead like me could feel his happiness. Sometimes I wonder if I put him on the wrong path. I thought perhaps he should have had a quiet, safe life. Her voice suddenly sharpened. But no, he is a Longbottom. His parents resisted Voldemort 3 times and fought till the last moment. Dumbledore looked at the 4 people lying in the bed and instead of scolding the old woman, said quietly, Neville is remarkable. He loves herbology. He fought a troll in defense, and his courage is like his father's. Just like Frank, just like Frank. Grandma Longbottom's lips moved. Her eyes fell to the sleeping Loren. His black curls were tousled. He'd grown a little taller since they last met. Boys that age seemed to sprout inches overnight. Neville had talked about this young wizard at home. Night excursions, beating a troll, dealing with the remnant of Voldemort's soul, top marks, a girlfriend at the top of her year, and also something called frozen pear, a dislike of Quidditch, and an interesting way of speaking and acting. Grandma Longbottom had been impressed, talented, restless, a typical Gryffindor. Until Dumbledore wrote telling her that the young wizard she'd briefly met in the restricted ward at Christmas had proposed a treatment. Her gaze fell on the mirror. The Longbottoms could tell at a glance it was a dark arts object. A metallic scent of blood clung to it, but it no longer mattered. Grandma Longbottom swore to Merlin in her heart that so long as Frank and Alice woke, this young wizard would be their benefactor. The restricted ward fell silent. The sun's angle shifted across the floor. Dumbledore watched scarlet magic thread around the 4 on the bed like woven clouds, connecting the Longbottoms to the mirror. The object was an alchemical creation, unknown heavy metal cast into the shape of a flower, with a small handle like a root drawing power from endless blood. Fear, wailing, and torment carried the link between souls. The silver mirror's surface shimmered with 2 utterly different magics, the sanctity and light of a unicorn and the chilling darkness of a Dementor. Together, they gave Loren the power to shape illusions. He had seen that power used on Sirius before. Sometimes Dumbledore clicked his tongue, wondering which bits of knowledge Flamel had passed on to Loren that let him walk that shadowed path. Legilimency, Sectum Sempra, a mirror of blood magic. If the shadows weren't counterbalanced by the brightness in Loren's heart, Dumbledore could not be sure these things wouldn't make him into another Dark Lord. Neville's body suddenly surged with a violent pulse of magic. Dumbledore's brows lifted. "They're waking," he murmured. Neville's eyes flew open. His whole body convulsed as he gave a pained cry, still trapped in the last vestige of the illusion. "Quick, get out through Nocturne Alley," he shouted. The anguish from his soul had tensed his muscles and pressed on his throat. His vocal cords tore, making his voice thin and ragged. "Neville, Neville, what's wrong?" Grandma Longbottom panicked and darted to his side. "Grandma, Grandma!" Neville wept, throwing his arms around her and burying his face against her, sobbing, "Crucio, Crucio." Grandma Longbottom's eyes filled instantly. She pressed his head, stroking him and murmuring, it's all right. There's no Crucio here, no Crucio." "Mother?" a man's voice called from the side, bewildered. Grandma Longbottom turned and stared at her son Frank. He looked clearer than she'd seen in years, no silly blankness, only confused curiosity. "Dumbledore, Mother?" Frank scratched his head. "Alice, this." He seemed to be missing pieces of memory, taking in the ward and the fragile figure of his wife with bewilderment. Alice watched Neville's distress, tears welling, pressing a hand to her heart. "Neville," she whispered, choked. "Frank, Alice, at last you're awake." Grandma Longbottom cried, tears of joy streaming down her face. The old woman's weeping brought memories rushing back. Frank and Alice scrambled out of bed and stumbled into each other's arms, weeping. Loren and Dumbledore exchanged a glance and slipped quietly from the restricted ward. As they walked down the corridor toward the stairs, Dumbledore rubbed his eyes, his voice full of feeling. A reunion after a long separation. There's nothing more moving. It's true in every story. Loren watched Dumbledore rub his eyes and couldn't help a small, wry smile. Then the feeling faded. "You're over 100. Can you still be brought to tears?" he teased. "Emotion knows no age. Even if 600-year-old Flamel were still alive, he'd cry at this," Dumbledore replied. He always sheds tears when watching an opera. You gave the Longbottoms their happy ending, Loren. They owe you that, Dumbledore added. Actually, it was Neville who found his parents, Loren said, shaking his head. He must have suffered terribly in the third layer of the illusion. At the end of the corridor, they passed a neighboring room where Healer Mellum was bent over the patient records, quill flying so fast it left after images. They softened their footsteps and didn't speak until they reached the fourth floor. You proposed the treatment method, Dumbledore said earnestly. You opened the way for Neville and his parents to be reunited. Loren, you have a heart of gold. I only hope it never gets stained. Loren translated the praise into platitudes in his head and pretended not to hear. It won't work for every patient with soul injuries, he said. Keep it quiet for me. Don't let every corner of the wizarding world come knocking. Dumbledore smiled. I understand. Tell the Longbottoms to keep it a secret too. They will. They left the main entrance of St. Mungo's, and Loren used Dumbledore's apparition to return to Hogwarts. The students had all left. The castle was tranquil. Bluebells bloomed in the courtyard, and shrubs grew lush and green. The ghosts, no longer worried about barging through someone, darted freely, thin silver forms tracing light. Sir Nicholas glided ahead, his head floating slightly askew, the thin thread that attached it making Loren grimace. In the Gryffindor common room, Hermione stood by the window in a blue and white plaid jacket and black denim, smiling. I've learned apparition, she said, lifting her chin with mock pride. Don't prank me during the holidays or you'll be sorry. She clicked her teeth and clenched her fists, her fair skin bright in the sunlight. Loren chuckled and walked over, tugging her fist down. It's almost lunchtime. Shall we eat here and then go home, or go straight home for lunch? Hermione hesitated. Let's eat at school. I still have things to pack. I probably won't make it home. Why pack? Can't you just drop everything in the pendant space? Loren asked. I'm organizing things in the pendant. I can't just stuff them in, she answered. Loren fell silent, and she gave him a disgusted look. You don't just pile things up, do you? They're clean. Piling them won't make them dirty, and I can find what I need. It's just not neat the way you imagine neatness, he defended. Hermione leaned in, reached into his collar, and pulled out the dolphin pendant, peeking inside between the scales. The sudden closeness made Loren's heart skip. He felt the warmth of her breath at his neck. Sunlight through the window suddenly felt like a furnace. Loren tried to lean back, but Hermione tugged his shirt. Don't move. I want to see how messy your storage is. She pulled, and Loren stumbled forward. His lips brushed her forehead. They froze for a heartbeat, the accidental contact like two sparks striking, heat rushing up their noses. After a moment, Hermione snapped out of it, stepped back, cheeks flushed. I still have some packing to do. I'll go. And you, organize your space properly. It's too messy. She looked up and saw him pursing his lips as if savoring something. Hermione blushed harder and fled up the stairs. Loren watched her go, smiling. She wanted to lecture me. In her dormitory, Hermione burrowed beneath the covers and let out an embarrassed sigh. The shyness bloomed into sweetness in her chest. A warm, itchy flutter hovered between her brows and sank straight to her heart. It took 10 minutes to calm. Then she stepped carefully out of the dormitory, peered over the stairs, and watched Loren. He sat on the sofa with a copy of Transfiguration Today. Seeing her peeking head, he called in a calm voice. Come down for lunch. We'll go home after we eat. Relieved but oddly regretful, Hermione went down. The two of them headed to the great hall and found the house tables pushed to the walls. In the center was a short table where Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, Snape, Sprout, Flitwick, and Kettleburn were already seated, along with Filch, Madame Pince, Madame Pomfrey, and Hagrid. Loren, Hermione, sit here, Dumbledore called cheerfully. You made it. Sylvanus isn't leaving until this afternoon, so we thought we'd have another luncheon for him. There aren't many of us. Using the house tables would look odd. Sit, sit. They took seats at the right end next to Hagrid. We're still waiting for Professor Vector from Arithmancy, Professor Burbage from Muggle Studies, and Professor Babbling from Ancient Runes, Dumbledore added with a chuckle. Oh, and Professor Trelawney is usually by herself. Otherwise, you'd meet all the elective professors. Professor McGonagall added, Professor Babbling has already left. He's gone to an excavation of ancient ruins in Egypt. Hermione's eyes lit up. She leaned toward Professor Kettleburn. What about care of magical creatures next year? What will we get to meet? Kettleburn laughed. Ask the wrong man. I'm retiring. I recommended Hagrid to take over. You can ask him. Hagrid? Hermione said, surprised. Hagrid looked bashful. I dunno. I hope I can do it. Believe me, Hagrid, Kettleburn said with a smile, there's no one more suited. Dumbledore nodded in agreement, and Hagrid looked as if he might cry. The Great Hall doors opened again, and Professor Trelawney glided in, every bit as ethereal as ever. Sybil, what an unexpected delight, Dumbledore rose. I was just gazing into my crystal ball. To my astonishment, I foresaw myself abandoning my solitary meal to join your gathering, Trelawney intoned in her most mystical voice. How could I refuse the call of destiny? I hastened from my tower. Do forgive my lateness. Her arrival put Loren on edge. Trelawney swept toward the central table, her large eyes scanning the faces. Suddenly, she uttered a terrified shriek. I dare not, Principal. If I sit at this table, there will be 13 of us. 13, the unluckiest number. When 13 dine together, the first to rise is the first to die. Loren's pupils dilated. The dinner of 13 superstition flashed in his mind. Even if most of Trelawney's conscious predictions were nonsense, this one had a way of coming true. He quickly checked with his magic vision. There were no hidden animagi, no ghost hiding under the table, no extra pets among them. He counted and saw only 12 people total. Everyone looked at Trelawney. McGonagall, impatient, said, We're willing to take the risk, Sybil. Sit down. She was about to scold Loren for being cowed by her, but before she could, Loren rose abruptly, drawing astonished stares. He stood for a moment and then said, Professor, I think it's better not to take the risk. Hermione and I need to go home, so we'll leave now. Hermione stared at him, surprised. Don't worry, Loren, McGonagall snapped. Unless there's a deranged axeman outside waiting to chop down the first person who leaves, there's no danger. Flitwick and Kettleburn laughed. Trelawney looked insulted, glared at McGonagall, then fixed her gaze on Loren expectantly. Loren hesitated, awkward, unsure whether to stay. Dumbledore saw the dilemma and smiled. Minerva, let us be understanding of students who want to go home early. After all, we were the same at school. He nodded at Loren. We'll see you next term. Give my regards to the Granger couple and Mr. Bates. Goodbye, Principal and Professors. Loren relaxed, took Hermione's hand, and strode out of the hall. Trelawney curled her lips into a victorious smile and took a seat. Silence settled over the table for a moment. Most of the professors assumed Loren had been frightened by Trelawney. Some suspected other motives. Dumbledore and Snape exchanged a look, thoughtful. There were fewer than 13 people at the table now. Professor Vector and Professor Burbage had not yet arrived for the luncheon. Led out of the great hall by Loren, Hermione glanced back. There were no frantic executioners at the doors. The castle was as quiet and ordinary as ever. When they stepped outside onto the path, the sun warmed them, and Hermione felt, with a simple, sinking certainty, that Loren really intended to go home. Loren, why are we leaving? Do you really believe Professor Trelawney's prophecy? She asked. Her practical mind told her the prophecy was absurd. When 13 people dine together, the first to rise will be the first to die. It wasn't scientific, and McGonagall's sharp rebuttal had made it sound hardly magical either. Still, Loren looked frightened. He'd insisted on leaving without eating. Hermione wanted to know why. Loren hesitated. He could sense the anti-apparition wards around the castle. They still had to walk a bit further before they could apparate. I don't know how to explain it, he said at last. Professor Trelawney often seems unreliable, but not every one of her predictions is nonsense. She predicted that Harry would defeat Voldemort, Hermione said. She even said Dumbledore and I would go to Albania to find traces of him. But the first to rise will be the first to die. That's hardly believable. Still, when she said it, it felt like more than idle guesswork. I don't want to take chances. He led her on. Hermione tilted her head. She only said the first to rise would be the first to die, not when or how. And frankly, Dumbledore is 112. If anyone were to die first in the normal course of things. She slowed, muttering, it would probably be him. Loren stopped and looked at her oddly. That actually makes sense. He was battling the script of the world he'd known. a superstition that felt like destiny. He hadn't thought about the simple possibility that Dumbledore, after whatever came, might retire, travel, or die of old age first. The idea left him pensive. So should we go back and finish our dinner? The professors will think you're ridiculous, Hermione scoffed, but she took his hand and pulled him along. Look, it's a vague truism at best. I can make another prophecy. Professor Celticborn should be the second to go. He's ancient and in poor health. Loren stared a moment. The offhand line sounded unreasonably plausible. But, he started, fending off his unease, I don't have a good impression of Trelawney right now. We'll see what divination class says next term. They walked on until they were safely away from the wards. Loren explained why he'd wanted to leave in the first place. I forgot to ask about Neville's parents. Was their treatment successful? It should have been, Loren replied. When they woke, they cried in each other's arms. I left before Dumbledore started crying with them. I didn't want to watch. That's good, Hermione said, cheerful again. She paid no attention to his aside about the headmaster, and they kept walking, following the path beside the Black Lake and stopping only at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. With a soft pop, they apparated. They reappeared not at Hermione's house, but at Loren's front door in Hampstead Garden suburb. The space in front of the door twisted for a moment, and Loren stepped through. Hermione arrived at his side a heartbeat later. Why are you coming to my house instead of yours? Loren asked blankly. My parents are at the clinic, Hermione said, self-righteous. No one's home. Besides, you're the reason I missed lunch, so I come to you. It was a good enough reason. Loren pushed open the door. The house was clean but quiet and empty. There was no smell of cooking. Mr. Bates doesn't seem to be home either, Hermione said, following him in. He probably went out. The refrigerator held only drinks. Bates didn't cook much. Hermione wandered into the kitchen and found a little rust on the bottom of the iron pot. She poked it. A reddish powder stained her fingertip. She smeared it on Loren's arm with a mischievous grin. Let's go to my house. My fridge will have ingredients. At the Granger house, Loren opened their refrigerator, paused as he regarded a tub of sheep's milk ricotta, lemon-scented, the recipe he'd taught Bates in the mountains. He grabbed a bottle of cola, opened it with the refrigerator's bottle opener, stuck in a straw, and handed it to Hermione. I know why Bates's pot was rusty, he said, softening. Grandpa Bates is eating at my house, Hermione said, drinking. Loren felt a warm relief. He was grateful he'd met Hermione and that Bates had met her parents. Otherwise, the old man might have been terribly lonely. Can I make fried egg noodles? Loren asked. All your jams won't help. There are only eggs and pasta. Hermione cleared the counter and made room. Loren fried the eggs crisp at the edges, added water, covered the pan until the liquid turned milky, then dropped in the noodles. 10 minutes later, 2 steaming bowls were ready, seasoned with salt, pepper, and Worcestershire sauce. Loren turned his fork into a pair of slender wooden chopsticks and ate with practiced ease. The noodles tasted impossibly good for something so simple, and Hermione watched enviously as he slurped. After dinner, they were too lazy to tidy up. They flopped onto the sofa and watched television, not caring what was on. In the warm comfort of the house, the afternoon drifted toward sleep. A BBC bulletin eased past them. 2 months ago, American astronomers Eugene and Carolyn Shoemaker and amateur David Levy had discovered a comet at Palomar Observatory. It was named Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9. Captured by Jupiter's gravity, it had become a short-period comet orbiting the giant planet and torn apart by tidal forces, broken into 21 fragments. It would continue to orbit Jupiter for some time. Their eyes went unfocused, and they nodded off. Loren dreamed of a blurred world without day or night, devoid of life. In the yellow haze, stark white clouds twisted into vast oval storms that grew into tornadoes. Storms swept across the land, fiery meteors fell, and the sky seemed to ignite. A sea of flame boiled. When he woke, the TV was off. Hermione's head rested on his shoulder, and he could smell stewed beef. Mr. Bates, tell the 2 little ones to wake up for dinner, Monica called from the kitchen. Heavy footsteps approached, and a large warm hand ruffled Loren's hair. You awake, boy? Why aren't you getting up? Bates chuckled. Outside, the sky had burned into an orange halo at sunset, and a little of the dream's colors lingered in Loren's mind. Hermione stirred and mumbled, Long time no see, Grandpa Bates. Long time no see, little Hermione, Bates replied. They both flushed. Having snoozed on the sofa all afternoon and been seen by both sets of parents was embarrassing, but the evening's light hid their reddening faces. Dinner's ready, Monica announced again. They scrambled up and took their seats. Wendell was already at the table, holding the evening paper, its headlines screaming about Comet Shoemaker Livy 9, the sword of Damocles that nearly destroyed Earth. Loren let his gaze linger on the article. You said your letter said you'd be back today, Wendell said, folding the paper and pushing plates toward them. We figured you'd arrive in the evening. The Hogwarts Express takes a day. Bates sighed. I was home at 11. When lunchtime came and you still weren't back, I was sure you'd be late. I didn't expect you two to show up at lunch, though. Sigh. Monica smiled. You must be knackered if you slept all afternoon. Conversation filled the table. What to outsiders might sound like nagging, but to the family was warmth and relief. Hermione explained the term's events in a rush. A certain hateful person who'd worked with a mysterious headmaster and controlled a basilisk, the fear in the castle, and how she'd stayed to investigate. In the end, she pinned it all on Loren. It's his fault, she declared. Right, Bates agreed quickly, joining in. He didn't need to understand the details. If Hermione said it, it had to be true. Wendell and Monica exchanged amused looks. They didn't know what Voldemort or the Ministry of Magic were, but they knew the headmaster had kept the school safe. Knowing the children were fine, they relaxed. Loren argued his innocence for a while and lost. He was sentenced to a week of family chores. Conversation meandered from school stories to strange dental clinic patients to Bates's latest financial investments. The Granger house hadn't been this lively in a long time. Laughter didn't stop. Wendell glanced back at his unfinished newspaper and raised a thoughtful eyebrow. Did you see what the paper said? If Jupiter hadn't been there, that comet would have hit Earth and wiped us out, like the dinosaurs. Suppose our rockets and missiles couldn't stop it. In a global catastrophe like that, would wizards have a way to deal with it? He waved his hands as if to gesture at monuments. Is that how Stonehenge or crop circles were made? Hermione's eyes lit up. You could try slowing charms or levitation spells, but a comet that big, maybe no wizard has magic powerful enough. I wonder if Master Dumbledore could do it. The third time she'd heard about Shoemaker Livy 9, Loren felt an odd, precise unease, an instinct, like a thread tugging at him. He recalled a conversation with Flamel after a bright night on Mars when he'd asked when the Book of Abraham would open again. Flamel had said only, "When the time comes, you will know." Mention of comets and planets made Hermione thoughtful. The Ministry's Department of Mysteries has a room for the planets, you know. I didn't get to see it last time. Maybe I will someday. Loren, what do you think about working for the Ministry after we graduate? Ah! Huh! Loren snapped out of his thoughts about the comet. He shrugged. You can work there. I'm not interested. Bates sighed and gently smacked him on the shoulder. What nonsense. He looked half exasperated, half amused. The house rang with the family's laughter as the comet's shadow, on the news in Loren's mind, stayed quietly at the edge of things. Chapter 264, Start of Vacation. Loren and Bates didn't say their goodbyes until the sky had fully darkened. Summer nights buzzed with insects. Only a thin crescent of moon hung overhead, not particularly dramatic, but the scattered stars were bright and sharp, like pinpricks of light. Loren looked up at the crescent and asked, Grandpa Bates, how's your werewolf condition? Have you had any trouble with it this past year? Bates rapped his chest with a friendly laugh. No, it hasn't come back since Headmaster Dumbledore treated me last time. He put an arm around Loren and gave his shoulder a gentle pat. Study your magic well and become a wizard like Headmaster Dumbledore someday. Loren smiled. Oh, Bates mused for a moment, but you don't have to be that kind of wizard. Just be happy. Don't worry about how you live. You're very open-minded, Loren said, grinning. I've always tried to be. Bates remembered the little scene at dinner, rubbed his head, and added with a chuckle, whether you work or not, if Hermione wants to do something, you ought to help her. Forget that, Loren said. Whatever she wants to do is too troublesome. Hey, you little... Bates started, but they both laughed. They walked down the lane under the streetlights, their shadows stretched long and thin. Back home, Loren put away his things and pulled some everyday clothes from his pendant into the wardrobe. With the help of household magic, cleaning spells and the like, his room was already tidy. He washed up and was in bed before 10. After settling himself and finding a comfortable position, Loren took out the fantastic book and touched the book-shaped icon. His consciousness shifted, and he was once more in the brightly lit virtual library. The library had grown considerably since he first entered. Flamel had opened a dedicated wing for Muggle books. The collection now included 6 centuries worth of Nicholas Flamel's books and the holdings of an entire national library. Loren felt certain he wouldn't live long enough to read them all. Flamel still indulged the same vision. Every time Loren visited the fantastic book, he sank into a sea of books. Loren seemed more interested in the humanities and social sciences, and only skimmed the natural sciences. Deep theoretical work gave even a disembodied immortal a headache. "You seem troubled," Flamel observed, looking up from a volume titled Studies on Hysteria. Loren nodded. "After we got back from school, I saw a news report about a comet. Then I had a strange dream that felt like an omen." Flamel set the book aside, intrigued. "Tell me about the comet." The news said the comet came out of the outer asteroid belt and entered the inner solar system as a periodic comet. On July 8, 1992, when it was about 40,000 kilometers from Jupiter's surface, Jupiter's tidal forces tore it into 21 fragments. Those fragments are now being pulled by Jupiter's gravity and are expected to collide with its southern hemisphere. "The power of the heavens," Flamel murmured. "That could indeed be a sign connected to the Book of Abraham. What about your dream?" Loren considered for a moment, drew his wand, touched it to his temple, and pulled out a thread of silver-white memory. He flicked his wand upward, projecting the dream into the dome of the virtual library. The dome faded, and light and shadow flowed into the scene he had seen. Endless yellow-brown dust, bright white clouds swept into and were engulfed by oval anticyclonic storms that ballooned into massive tornadoes. Raging storms raced across a vast world. Scorching rain of fire fell like meteors, igniting the sky. A sea of flame boiled and burned. Fiery stones dragged blazing tails and carried terrible force as they crashed into the surface beneath the dust. The impact sent violent vibrations rolling across the world. Even more dust rose, hiding everything from view. "That doesn't look like Earth," Flamel frowned. "From what you've described, this feels prophetic, like a comet striking Jupiter." "So what should I do? What preparations can be made against the power of the stars?" Loren asked. "What can you do?" Flamel spread his hands. "The Book of Abraham is too mysterious. Your circumstances are not the same as mine was. I'm not in a position to give you concrete advice." Loren felt deflated. "Then we just wait?" "For now, it seems the only option." London, the Creevy household. "Colin, come down for dinner," Mrs. Creevy called from the kitchen, carrying a plate of Yorkshire pudding to the table. Like Colin, she had light brown curly hair and was not old. "This boy won't talk to his family properly when he's home for the holidays. That camera of his is in such a state. How are we supposed to fix it?" Mr. Creevy sat at the table, teasing the youngest child, Dennis. "Let him tinker. If it can't be fixed, we'll buy him another camera." Mrs. Creevy snapped back, indignant. "Another one? Do you think we're some rich family? How many milk bottles would you have to deliver to buy a camera?" Mr. Creevy was a milkman. His friendly manner and dependable service had won them enough customers to get by, but they weren't rolling in money. He just smiled and put Dennis on a nearby chair while setting the table. "Don't be cross. Worst comes to worst, we can go to a second-hand shop and find an old one." He brightened at the recollection. "Have you seen the photos Colin takes? They move. I never believed there were really so many wizards in magic. With all the things that boy's done, I believed it a long time ago. Dennis is probably a wizard too." Mrs. Creevy called again. "Colin, if you don't come down, I'll make that camera your dinner." Footsteps pitter-pattered down the stairs, and Colin burst into the room grinning. "Mum, Dad, you won't believe it. The film was just singed around the edges. We can fix it by replacing a few parts." "All you ever think about is cameras," Mrs. Creevy scolded as she playfully swatted him. "It's dinner time, and we still haven't talked about your petrification." When Professor McGonagall wrote to tell us you'd been attacked, your father nearly dropped a dozen milk bottles. Mr. Creevy's mouth twitched. He was annoyed she'd brought it up in front of their son, but he kept quiet. Colin sat dutifully. It's okay, isn't it? Harry Potter defeated the basilisk. You'll never stop talking, Mrs. Creevy sighed. The meal was noisy and warm, full of food and chatter. After dinner, Mrs. Creevy cleared up while Mr. Creevy and Colin discussed camera parts. A knock sounded on the door. Who's knocking this late? The milk's already been delivered, Mr. Creevy muttered. He opened the door and found an old man with a long white beard and flowing robes standing on the doorstep. Colin's face lit up. Headmaster Dumbledore. Good evening, Dumbledore said with a small nod. Mr. and Mrs. Creevy, I've come to discuss compensation regarding Colin's attack. Mr. Creevy stood stunned in the doorway, glancing at his son. You have plenty of time to talk. I can visit my next customer first, he stammered. Loren's face itched. He scratched and blinked awake to find Hermione leaning close, watching him. Beneath her long lashes, her large brown eyes were clear as glass and sparkling like stars. If his memory served, it was the second day of the holidays, and he was in his own bedroom. The door should have been locked. How did you get into my room? Loren sat up, clutching the thin blanket, half surprised and half suspicious. Hermione let go of a stray strand of hair and chuckled. Apparition. One whoosh and I was here. Whoosh. Loren's eyes practically rolled. Hermione Granger, trespassing into a private residence is illegal. That's true under both Muggle and Wizarding law. Hermione sat down on the edge of the bed. I didn't. I knocked when I came to the house. Grandpa Bates opened the door. Loren hesitated, then realized he wasn't naked, and there was no reason to stay wrapped in the blanket. He grabbed Hermione's shoulders and gave her a mock shake. Then why didn't you knock to get into my bedroom? Hermione couldn't hide a smile. I didn't want to wake you. You woke me. I woke you on purpose. I timed it. 15 minutes after you should be getting up. Loren's expression turned to disbelief. So you stood by my bed and watched me sleep for 15 minutes? I did, Loren sighed. Fine. Tomorrow I'll come and wake you up. You're mean, Hermione grumbled as her smile vanished. You're meaner, he shot back. At last, she relented. Get up. Today we're going to the mall to buy clothes. You lost, he declared. Who plays such a childish game with you, she demanded. You're childish. You're childish. You're more childish. You're even more childish. Amid their bickering, the summer holiday of 1993 began. Unlike previous years, the Grangers didn't shut the dental clinic for Hermione's holidays. The practice stayed open. The two families sometimes ate together and spent weekends out on short trips. One Saturday in late June found them at Brighton Beach. The sky was vast and blue with a few scattered clouds, the sun bright, and the sand spread like a warm carpet. The sea washed gently at the shore, bringing the steady sound of waves. A small yacht drifted lazily offshore. Loren, wearing a baseball cap and a short-sleeved shirt, lounged in a chair. In front of him, a blue bucket held 4 or 5 banded bamboo sharks, sometimes called cat sharks, plentiful and easy to catch in these waters. Bates sat back, enjoying the sea breeze and staring out at the horizon, not even pulling his rod when the float dipped. Wendell, however, took his fishing seriously and fished constantly, but his bucket was empty. He hadn't caught a thing. Loren decided he would stop fishing that day. It would be rude to keep going and embarrass Hermione's father. Loren, why are you lying down? Get up and keep fishing. Wendell protested, feigning sternness, though he kept sneaking glances at the fish in Loren's bucket. The winds picked up. It's hard to fish. I'll rest a bit, Loren said. Yes, that's true, Wendell conceded. I usually fish in fresh water on weekends. Switching to sea fishing is unfamiliar, and the sea breeze makes it harder. Bates chuckled. The wind never failed them at sea, and by sunset Wendell had still caught nothing. They went home empty-handed. Surrey, Little Whinging, number 4, Privet Drive. Harry Potter was unusual in many ways. For starters, he hated the summer holidays more than almost anything. For another, he didn't want to do his homework at all, but to avoid spending time with the Dursleys, he often busied himself with it in the cupboard under the stairs just a few days into the holiday. The sun was nearly down, and the light was dim. Harry lay on his bed with a flashlight in one hand and a large leather-bound book, Bathilda Bagshot's History of Magic, open on his pillow. His eagle feather quill scratched across the paper as he worked on his essay, titled Why the Practice of Burning Witches in the 14th Century Was Completely Pointless. The quill paused on a useful passage. Harry pushed his round glasses up his nose, brought the flashlight closer, and scanned the page. In the Middle Ages, there had been witch hunts. Muggles would capture supposed witches, tie them to stakes, and set firewood and kerosene alight. But burning was pointless. The flame-freezing charm could leave a witch unharmed. Gwendolen the Weird liked to disguise herself. She had been caught and burned 47 times and had survived each time. Harry was silent for a beat, then dipped his quill in ink and copied the passage into his essay. "Harry, come out to dinner." Aunt Petunia called from downstairs. "Coming," he answered. Outside were the Dursleys, Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia, and their son Dudley, the only family Harry had left. Because of them, he had never enjoyed his summers, except last year when he'd spent the season with his godfather Sirius. But Sirius had moved away, and now the Dursleys were all he had. Lately, their treatment of him had softened somewhat, which made him feel oddly uncomfortable. When Aunt Petunia saw his flashlight, she hesitated and said, "Harry, if you like doing your homework in there, we could run an electric wire and put a light in." Uncle Vernon and Dudley looked on, but said nothing. "No need," Harry replied quietly. The kinder the Dursleys were, the more awkward he felt. He preferred to stay shut away and keep busy with his homework. 265. Egypt dinner at the Dursleys ended in an odd, strained silence. Aunt Petunia set the jar of raspberry jam in the center of the table. "Does your owl need anything to eat?" "I saved some bread," she said. Dudley plunged a large spoon into the jam. "No," Harry answered. "Owls fly at night and will hunt for themselves." Uncle Vernon's mustache twitched, a dollop of gravy clung to his chin. Petunia opened her mouth to say more, but Dudley drowned her out with a long, loud belch. "I want more bacon. There's still some in the frying pan," Aunt Petunia said, rising to fetch it. "Harry, are you full? Would you like more?" "No, thank you." Harry, sitting closest to the frying pan, shook his head and then rose to hand it on. "I'm full. I'm going to do my homework. Leave the dishes in the sink. I'll do them later." He closed the door at the top of the stairs and took out a small crystal globe that gave off a soft, silvery light so the little room would not fall completely dark. Below, the Dursleys relaxed as soon as he was gone. Uncle Vernon and Dudley's voices grew louder and more careless. "Mum, I want more. Eat more. We must fatten you up quickly. Look, that school food has made you thin." Aunt Petunia's voice trembled. "Nonsense. I was never hungry at Smeltings," Vernon barked. "Dudley eats well, doesn't he, son?" "Heh." Dudley laughed stupidly. Harry looked at the half-finished essay on his bed, leaned his back against the doorframe, and sighed. Since Dumbledore's involvement last summer, Petunia had changed. She had become, oddly, competent and caring. She fussed about his food, his clothes, whether he had a blanket. Dudley always got special portions. She even fretted over the speed his hair grew. Vernon and Dudley no longer barked at him the way they used to. Last year he'd spent most of the holidays with Sirius, so life at Privet Drive hadn't seemed so bad. He simply hadn't had to be at home much. This year felt different. "What's Sirius doing?" Harry muttered, feeling petulant. He had no appetite for the essay. He dug in his trunk for stationery, flopped on the bed, and began a letter. "Dear Sirius, hope you're well. I don't know what you're doing or why you left in such a hurry, but please tell me. This summer is going to be so long and boring for several more weeks. Aunt Petunia has tried to get me out of the cupboard 3 times already, but I refuse. I'm a little afraid I'll forget the years I spent in that dark little room. Looking forward to your reply. Harry." He left the letter on the bedside table and weighed it down with his alarm clock so the wind wouldn't blow it away. Hedwig was out. He'd have to wait for her to return before posting it. He was about to return to his essay when the telephone rang downstairs. He heard Vernon answer. "This is Vernon Dursley." Then, a shrill voice on the line. "Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? I want to speak to Harry Potter." Ron's voice was shredded by nervous excitement or unfamiliarity with telephones. Uncle Vernon jumped, holding the receiver half a foot from his ear, staring at it in incomprehension. "Who is it?" Vernon barked down the line. "Who are you?" "Ron Weasley." Ron yelled, as if announcing himself from the other side of a football pitch. "I'm Harry's friend from school." Harry pushed open the door and hurried down the stairs. Vernon glared at him, eyes small and hard, then thrust the phone into his hand and stalked off. "Ron, it's me," Harry said, trying to steady his voice until the excitement subsided. "I can hear you." There was a pause, then Ron's voice came back, normal and relieved. "Oh, Harry, I can hear your voice." Harry pinched his aching ear where the echo had unsettled it. "Just talk normally, Ron. I can hear you." He could hear the television volume in the kitchen being turned down. "Hey, Harry, this is brilliant," Ron said. "Ginny, move back. Don't stand on the wire." "Dad says the signal is in the wires. How can I stand on it?" Ginny's indignant voice piped up. "Little Ronnie, say hello to Harry," someone urged. "Quick, say hello." Harry smiled, imagining the Weasley household gathered around the phone, the children pushing in, Ginny craning forward, Fred and George peering at the receiver as if eager to dismantle it. "Compared to magic, the telephone isn't that special," Harry said. "Tell Mr. Weasley to pay the phone bill on time or it'll be cut off." "Don't worry," Ron hurried. "I called to say my dad won the Daily Profits lottery. 700 galleons. We're using it to go to Egypt for the holidays. Bill works there as a curse breaker for Gringotts." Harry felt something heavy settle over him. So don't have Hedwig deliver letters to us while we're gone. She wouldn't have to fly all the way from Britain to Egypt. We'll call you when we're back." Harry gave a long, lonely sigh. "I know, you're all off on your summer holidays, with you lot and Hermione too." "Loren and Hermione? Are they going to Egypt?" "They haven't written or called me once." There was teasing laughter. George and Fred leaned close to the mouthpiece. "That's what happens when people are in love. Percy's upstairs all day writing to Penelope." "George, Fred." Percy's voice broke in, mortified, then everyone laughed. After a moment, Ron's voice returned. "Ginny's trying to grab the phone. Do you want to say something to her?" Harry blinked and gathered himself. Sure." There was the sound of the phone being passed. Ginny's voice, shy and small after weeks apart, came through. "Good evening, Ginny," Harry said brightly. "Good evening, Harry," she answered, nerves making her words soft. "How's your summer? Take pictures for me in Egypt. There are loads of magical ruins." "Okay." Ginny took a breath. "We'll be back a week before term starts, and then we'll go to London to buy our new books. Will you be there? We'd like to meet you." "I'll be there," Harry promised. "And don't let the muggles make you unhappy," Ginny added quickly and quietly. Her voice warmed him in a way he hadn't expected. He paused a moment and then said, "I won't." George and Fred each grabbed a line for a quick hello before the call finally wound down. From the kitchen, the Dursleys' voices drifted up again. "People like him actually called our house," Vernon grumbled. "Aye," he spluttered with displeasure. "Let him call," Petunia said defensively. "His godfather and the headmaster of that school promised nothing that concerns us will come here." Dudley wasn't listening. He belched and demanded, "Can I turn the telly up? And can I have more gravy?" Harry lingered only a moment, then went briskly upstairs. He had to write to Loren and Hermione, otherwise the long summer would press on unbearably. Hampstead Garden, a suburban villa. Hedwig, all white and immaculate, landed on the second-floor sill and peered through the glass. Her recipient inside was still fast asleep. Hedwig had been a faithful messenger for 2.5 years and knew how these things worked. She nudged the letter from her beak and tapped at the pane. Tap, tap, no movement. Hedwig cocked her head, puzzled. Had she tapped too lightly? She shifted her claws, made a bigger space, and rapped the window harder. Bang, bang, bang. She'd been too enthusiastic. The blow made her head spin a little, and she fluffed her wings twice to keep her balance. When she could see again, the room was still unchanged. Hedwig grew worried, then brightened as Hanch, the spectacled owl, home from a long night, arrived. The two were old acquaintances. Hedwig chattered rapidly. Hanch listened, nodded in mock seriousness, and then with one steady push, he slid the window open on its track. Hedwig looked at him with admiration as Hanch preened imperiously. He hopped to the pillow, set the letter down, and gave a gentle peck to the sleeper's nose. Loren stirred and opened his eyes. Hedwig, clean and white and utterly well cared for, cocked her head as Loren reached out and stroked her. He picked up the letter and read. Harry's note began with a long complaint, about Loren and Hermione putting romance before friendship and neglecting to contact him all holiday, then mentioned the Weasleys' trip to Egypt. Harry wrote that, if it were not for the necessary yearly stays with the Dursleys before he came of age, he would have left entirely. He confessed his confusion at Aunt Petunia's new kindness. He found it hard to accept that those changes made it more difficult to be angry with Uncle Vernon and Dudley. Egypt? Percy had mentioned something. Loren thought of Rune's ruins and the corners of old maps. Why use such a windfall just for a holiday when it could improve their lives? Why not invest, start a business? Fred and George hadn't even thought of that. Loren sat up at his desk, uncapped a fountain pen, and wrote back. He didn't have much to say about Harry and the Dursleys. He didn't share Dumbledore's sentimental view that Harry should try to make peace, nor did he think Harry needed to view them as enemies. Loren's advice was simpler. If you can't hate them, treat them like strangers. Accept what they offer as a transaction and give back the same. Owe nothing to anyone in feeling. He read his words over, then set the pen down and absently stroked the two owls. Hanch and Hedwig pecked at nuts and dried meat by his elbow until Hermione suddenly appeared at the bedside with a soft pop of air. She blinked, saw no one in the bed, and looked puzzled. Hanch and Hedwig tilted their heads and stared at her as if asking what had happened. Loren raised an eyebrow. "How do you explain this?" "I came to wake you," Hermione scolded, practical as ever. "Who told you to sleep so late? You haven't done your summer homework or previewed next term. I'm trying to be helpful." "You could have knocked," Loren said. "You wouldn't have heard it," Hermione said, surprised to find him already up. Then she spotted Hedwig. "What did Harry say?" she asked. She took the letter and read as if it were nothing out of the ordinary, making Loren grind his teeth in irritation. 5 minutes later, she picked up a pen and added a neat little postscript to Harry at the end of Loren's reply, 2 very different hands on one envelope. When Hedwig left, Hanch followed her out, as if to see a guest on his way respectfully. Hermione watched them fly off, and then remembered something. "Professor McGonagall said Professor Babbling is going to Egypt too. It sounds interesting." Loren looked up. "You mean?" Hermione's eyes lit. "We haven't gone anywhere this holiday, have we?" 266. Play and visit Dear Harry. Sorry, Loren is having trouble choosing his sunglasses, so I'm writing this letter. By the time you read this, Loren and I will already be on our way to Egypt. We decided to make Egypt our vacation destination. Owls get a hard time adapting to the Egyptian climate, so please take care of Hanch for us. Thank you. From what I've read, Egypt is full of ancient ruins, which should be very helpful for our optional course next semester. Egypt also has a fascinating local history of magic. There ought to be plenty to write about for essays. We've also decided to come to London during the last week of the summer holidays. Can you come? Will your aunt and uncle let you? If not, we'll see you on the Hogwarts Express on September 1st. Hermione sends her regards. P.S. Loren sends his. Harry folded the letter and looked at the spectacled owl, Hanch, who cocked his head and returned the stare. Harry reached out and smoothed the feathers on the owl's head. "Your owners just abandoned you for a holiday," he said. "Hoot," the owl replied. "That's right, without us." "Hoot. So what? Big deal. They knew what I went through at the Dursleys, and now they're gone. I don't even have anyone to talk to." "Hoot. Oh, come on, be sensible. Remember to come back before dawn." Harry cracked open the stairwell door and watched the owl fly out through the first-floor window. How nice it would be to be an owl. No worries, free to go anywhere. Merlin above, send me to Egypt too. He set Hermione's letter aside, lay back on the small bed, and sighed. Egypt, a country in northeastern Africa and one of the earliest places where magic was recorded. Long ago, ancient Egyptian wizards ruled alongside kings for a significant period. Eventually, wizards realized that such protection brought disaster. Tribes who benefited from wizards' aid would flourish and expand, but relied on magic so completely that they were powerless without it. Rivalries and wars followed. If wizards continually protected one group, they turned into agents of endless slaughter. Some wise wizards saw the danger, and after long discussion, the visible presence of wizards slowly disappeared from history. Their legends, however, survived among ordinary people. Those with selfish aims later wrapped magic in the language of gods, claiming to speak their will and punishing those who defied them. Thus began the age of divine right kings. Ladies and gentlemen, the aircraft is descending. Please return to your seats, fasten your seatbelts, stow your tray tables, and return your seatbacks to their upright positions. All personal computers and electronic devices must be turned off. Please ensure your carry-on items are properly stowed. Shortly, we will dim the cabin lights. Thank you. The announcement over the plane startled Hermione out of her reading. She rubbed her forehead, blinked dry eyes, and closed the History of Magic volume on Egypt. She'd only had time to skim the enormous time span. The plane was already preparing to land. The seating on the flight was roomy, 4 seats per row, 2 on each side of the aisle. Wendell and Monica sat behind Hermione and Loren. Bates was in the row ahead. Loren, beside her, wore a cotton eye mask shaped like sunglasses and slept soundly. Hermione pressed her lips together. She'd chosen to read on the flight, but watching Loren sleep so peacefully made her cross. "Wake up! We're in Cairo!" Hermione shook his shoulder. Loren slid out of the dream book's space, yanked off the eye mask, grabbed her arm, and pretended to be indignant. "You trying to throw me off the plane, you wicked dark witch?" Hermione giggled. By afternoon, the plane had landed. As soon as Loren stepped out, a wall of heat rolled in on them like a physical thing, scorching. It was high summer and 4 o'clock, but the Cairo sun still hung pitilessly. "Quick, quick, let's get inside," Wendell called, already soaked in sweat within minutes. Following airline staff, the group reached a lounge for a brief rest. The room was bright and clean, stocked with fruit and drinks. The hum of the air conditioner was a comfort. Wendell collapsed into a chair and sighed. "I'm used to Britain. This is something else." "I've done forced marches when I was young," Bates said cheerfully, looking around. "Traveling with Kit is worse than this. Luckily, most of our luggage is in Hermione and Loren's pendants, and the symbolic suitcases are handled by the hotel and airline." Wendell popped open a can of cola and took a gulp. "I can't imagine running about with luggage in this weather." A referral from one of Wendell's dental patients had made their trip easier. Monica remembered something and patted Hermione urgently. "Quick, sunscreen." Hermione gasped, pulled Monica aside, and helped her apply it. The 3 men smiled, watching the mother and daughter fuss. Loren opened a can of cola and asked, "So what's the plan now?" Wendell burped satisfyingly and felt the dryness ease. "We'll wait for the hotel to pick us up. It's a pickup service. The hotel will arrange our itinerary in Egypt and provide a guide." He added with a grin, "For anything magical, you'll have to look after yourselves." Loren nodded. Hermione darted back from the corner holding the sunscreen and smeared it over Loren's face, rubbing it in. "We're young, our skin's tender. Mum says you have to put it on or you'll burn." She paused, concentrating. "How will we find wizards in Egypt?" Loren finished applying the sunscreen before answering. "Egypt has the world's largest alchemy research center. I have their contact details. Once we've spent some time with the adults, we'll go look them up." That was news Loren had heard from Flamel. "Playing with the adults?" Wendell teased, and Monica and Bates laughed. About half an hour later, an Englishman from the airline led their guide to them at the arrivals. "Welcome to Cairo," he said, and performed a formal hat tip. "I'm Caleb. For the next few days, I'll be leading your tour of Egypt. If you have any observations, suggestions, or complaints, feel free to tell me at any time." They climbed into the hotel's private car, an extended model with plenty of space. Caleb and the driver sat up front. Wendell and Bates took the middle row. Monica and the children sat in the back. As soon as they left the airport, vendors and children flooded the roadside, shouting in languages the tourists didn't understand and waving cheap handicrafts, chasing the car. The driver navigated calmly to shake them off. Wendell looked startled. Caleb turned and warned them seriously. "Egypt is not like Britain. It's full of poverty and disease, and that breeds chaos and crime." He rattled off precautions. Intersections where illegal guides stop cars, people who will try to divert you to a parked lot, or forced sale hawkers who pester you into buying things you don't want. If you get separated from hotel staff and end up in someone else's car, don't panic. Usually they'll drive you to a nearby lot and offer you a carriage or a camel to get you to your destination. Find a public place and call the hotel. They'll send someone to help. Our hotel car has a conspicuous sign. Nailed it, he added. Other cars aren't so honest. They'll try to stop and sell you junk. The Grangers felt a little shaken, regretting their choice of Egypt as a holiday destination for a moment. Hermione watched the emaciated children and thin-limbed women by the roadside and felt a shock settle in her chest. This concrete reality of poverty made Egypt feel very different from her reading. By the time they checked into the Nile-side resort, evening had fallen. The sunset drenched everything in gold. Fields, desert, the hotel facade, and even the Nile's surface glittered like molten metal. From a distance, the stone carvings in the desert looked as if they'd been cut from pure gold. Hermione leaned on the balcony railing and stared into the distance, bathed in that light. Thinking about those children from earlier? Loren shadowed her posture and asked softly. She murmured. I know I can't help them all, but I can't stop thinking about it. Loren felt a strange tenderness. Remember what that History of Magic book said? The help of wizards can make people weaker. Long-term prosperity can only come if the people themselves strive and build stable communities. There are billions of people in the world, Hermione said, and only some countries are prosperous. India, parts of Africa. And magical creatures too, Loren added. Centaurs live as they always have. Even if we work ourselves to death, we can't save everyone. Hermione smiled. I know. I'll just do what I can. She thought briefly. I have some old books and clothes. When we get back, I'll sort them and donate them to charity. That's it? Loren asked. That's what I can do right now. The little witch sparkled gently in the Nile sunset. The next morning, Caleb took them to the Egyptian Museum, a 2-story stone building. The ground floor displayed artifacts in chronological order, from the Old Kingdom through Roman rule, including many fragments of ancient papyri. The papyri had decayed over thousands of years and often survived only in fragments bearing Greek, Latin, Roman, Arabic, and ancient Egyptian scripts. Hermione kept a small notebook and occasionally jotted symbols. Loren leaned closer to study the fragments. Their texture reminded him of the paper in the Book of Abraham. Faint traces of magic clung to some of the ink. He guessed they were relics from the period when wizards and muggles were in close contact. Even after the wizard's departure, these writings had been preserved in pyramid tombs and had survived. Flamel couldn't help himself. He slipped out of the enchanted book and flew around Loren, scrutinizing the symbols and inscriptions. Have you never been to Egypt before, Nay? Loren asked. That was 200 years ago, Flamel replied. There wasn't a museum then. The second floor held a special exhibition of artifacts from Egypt's last 2 dynasties. The Tutankhamun display, the golden mask, the human-shaped golden sarcophagus, and the golden throne were the museum's most prized pieces. But what most drew them was the mummy hall. More than 20 mummies of pharaohs and their consorts lay there, some over 3,500 years old and astonishingly well preserved. The best preserved was Rames II from the 19th dynasty. The hair and even the toenails were still visible. On the lids and inside the human-shaped coffins, protective symbols or scriptures were painted, sometimes even the deceased's patronus. The room smelled faintly of potions. Thousands of years had eroded most of the active magic, but certain residues and properties remained. Over the next few days, Caleb led them to several pyramids. The guide explained that the ancient Egyptians believed the soul survived after death, and that preserving the body would allow it to be reborn into the land of bliss after 300 years. Hence the meticulous tomb building. Flamel, however, offered another perspective to Loren. Rulers who had close contact with wizards discovered the existence of spirits and ghosts. Horrified, they realized death did not mean annihilation and began to seek ways of immortality and resurrection. Everything ancient in Egypt bore the shadow of wizards, the scripts, the scent, even the way bodies were prepared, reminiscent of brewing potions. If Egypt's history were a book, the influence of wizards would be the ink seeping through every page. 267, Alchemical Research Center. Kappa is Egyptian grilled lamb skewers? And flatbreads and naan, I want those. Grilled pigeon? Roasted squab? I'll take a portion of that too. Shawarma, like a Chinese rougiamo, one of those for me. Loren waved the menu, shaking his head with pleasant surprise. The dishes sounded warm and familiar. After he finished ordering from Caleb, he passed the menu around and sat back, eyes bright with anticipation. How many hot air balloons should we rent for tomorrow? Watching the sunrise from a hot air balloon was one of the hotel's suggested activities. 2, I think. Monica and I will take one, and Hermione will ride with you all in the other, Wendell said, a smile appearing on his face. Riding a hot air balloon with his wife to watch the sunrise felt romantic in a way they hadn't been for a long time. No, I won't. I want to ride with Mom. Ladies with ladies, gentlemen with gentlemen. That's how it should be. Hermione pouted, clutching Monica's arm. Monica gently pulled away. Hermione, you're grown now. You can't cling to your parents like you did when you were little. Hermione gave her a shocked look that made everyone at the table laugh. Monica hugged her and whispered something that sent a blush to the girl's cheeks. Embarrassing, thought Hermione as she glanced at Loren beside her. He was holding a meter-long Kappa grilled lamb skewer, gesturing it toward his mouth several times before realizing it was impractical to eat that way. With a small regret, he removed the meat from the skewer, placed it on a plate, dipped it into a tahini-like Egyptian barbecue sauce, and bit into it. His face lit up. He closed his eyes and savored the flavor. Hermione breathed a sigh of relief. Loren then removed more meat and offered it around. Try it, everyone. It's not the same as the lamb I grill, but it's better than British barbecue. Kappa grilled lamb skewers were different from the Xinjiang-style ones Loren knew. Only lean cuts from the leg and back are used, brushed with a seasoning of refined salt, pepper, ginger, scallions, and olive oil, then cut into 4 or 5 centimeter cubes, threaded onto meter-long skewers, and roasted in a special oven until the meat turns golden. Really? I'll try it, Wendell said, eyes bright. He had enjoyed Loren's grilling before and was curious about this local variation. Bates ate slowly, then said, I checked. People my age aren't allowed to go up in the hot air balloons. They're worried something might happen, and they wouldn't be able to get me to a hospital quickly. Wendell was taken aback. He knew better than most how strong his neighbor was. Bates even helped him move heavy fishing gear sometimes. We can pay extra. The hotel should accommodate us, right? Let's not. It's better not to trouble them. I don't want to wake up earlier than the sun either. Bates shook his head firmly. There are staff on the balloons to look after Loren and Hermione. You two just enjoy some time alone. Wendell scratched his head, only able to accept Bates's reasoning. After dinner, they retired to their rooms. At 3 in the morning, Hermione dragged Loren out of bed. They ate a quick breakfast and climbed into the special car the hotel had arranged. The desert air was bitterly cold. The hotel coats helped. The sky was a deep blue curtain. The sun had not yet appeared, but its light was already brushing the horizon, turning the night a clearer blue like Ravenclaw sapphires and illuminating stretches of yellow rock and sand. Half an hour later, they reached the balloon field. Staff were inflating the balloons. The pump's rumble echoed across the square, carrying through the quiet desert. Wendell and Monica entrusted the children to Caleb and hurried off to their balloon. Leaning against a pillar, Loren yawned and looked at the excited Hermione. We're wizards, you know. If you want to watch the sunrise from the sky, we could just take our broomsticks. That's not the same. How is it not the same? Brooms fly higher, they're more flexible, and you can adjust your position however you like. Hermione paused, actually finding his point for a moment. Forget it, she decided. She wasn't going to argue with this sleepy slug. It was cold to lean on the stone pillar, so Loren walked over and rested against her like a pillar to nap. Hermione pushed him a few times but couldn't budge him, so she let him lean there. The cool desert wind blew across the expanse, mingling with the roar of air pumps. She watched the balloon's canvas gradually fill and swell, until each balloon towered larger than a house. From the ground, the gondolas were only small specks, and the staff around them looked like busy ants. It's our turn. Hermione pulled Loren, and they climbed into the gondola. The pilot silently operated the burner, and with the majestic whoosh of flame, they felt the buoyant lift beneath their feet. Loren's drowsiness faded as the balloon rose. At first, there were cheers and exclamations from the onlookers, but once the balloons cleared the ground and the people below shrank into the distance, the world seemed to hush. The balloons, lit by firelight, complemented one another across the sky. The Nile and the desert mountains, rivers, and fields of Luxor spread beneath them, filling their view and hearts with a fresh, joyful wonder. Loren and Hermione watched east together. A red sun, the color of a salted duck egg yolk, rose slowly, spilling soft light that painted the sky crimson. As that red mutated into a dazzling gold, the world gleamed. Hermione stared at the rising sun, the golden light reflected in her eyes. Loren felt a deep peace he didn't get from riding a broomstick. Up there, empty above and below and seemingly alone in the world, the rosy light flowed like water and the clouds were dreamlike. They stood in the gondola, and the whole world seemed to hold only the two of them. Loren wanted to say something about the golden morning, the balloon, but when he met Hermione's gaze, he understood. Nothing needed to be said. Below them, the burner kept booming. Hermione recognized her parents' balloon by the colorful paint. Wendell and Monica were in their gondola, embracing and kissing as if oblivious to everything else. Even at that height, the sea of clouds stayed above them, unreachable. Below, sand dunes scattered and the Nile glittered like a silver ribbon around Luxor. Hermione felt steady in the swaying basket. It reminded her of the first time she went to Hogwarts. Strange places, strange faces, feeling unmoored and lifted by the stares of others. Loren was the balloon that let her touch down. A year had passed in a blink. Much had changed, and yet much felt the same. Loren watched the pilot with eager curiosity, trying to trade glances with him, and tentatively, to persuade him to let him touch the burner. The pilot politely averted his eyes. Hermione laughed softly. The world looked like a painting, but the scene they were in was uniquely beautiful. They visited the ancient ruins of Luxor on the east bank of the Nile, famed for the remains of the old capital Thebes and the vast Karnak temple, built 4,000 years ago and completed in the New Kingdom under Ramses II. After the temple, they drove to a seaside resort hotel in Hurghada on the Red Sea. Hurghada, capital of the Red Sea Governorate and a popular tourist spot, is also a rare habitable city in the desert and hosts a gathering place for Egyptian wizards. Wendell rubbed his hands at the sight of the Red Sea coast. "They say the fish here are very foolish. They'll burrow in the sand," he remarked. Hermione warned, "Don't even think about it. Loren won't go fishing. We're here to visit the wizarding gathering place." "What a pity." Wendell trailed off. Bates, who had been dozing, turned his head. "Is it safe? Wizards here aren't under the British ministry's jurisdiction, are they?" "Don't worry, Grandpa Bates," Loren said. "Most wizards follow International Confederation conventions, and if we run into trouble, Hermione and I can apparate away instantly." Hermione nodded with a little pride. "We can apparate back to the hotel." Loren smiled, but didn't elaborate. He still carried the Philosopher's Stone in his pendant, and the Deluminator retained traces of basilisk magic. Unless they met a wizard of Dumbledore's caliber, it was hard to say who should be more wary of whom. In Hurghada, they walked the coastal streets. Without parents or a guide, the country felt closer. Shirtless tourists in shorts mixed with locals in white robes and heavy red headgear. Camels with strange humps passed, chewing on dried grass. "Loren, do you really know the way?" Hermione asked suddenly. "You've never been here. Can you really find the entrance to the magical side?" "I might not know every street, but I know the destination," Loren said, his blue eyes reflecting a distant, magical light. After wandering through a maze of alleys, they arrived at a small handicraft shop, dirty, worn, the crooked sign above reading Hermes Goods Store. The walls were stained and yellowed. Passers-by barely glanced at it. On the sign, a set of scales representing alchemy made Loren smile. "Egypt Alchemical Research Center," Flamel's ethereal figure murmured beside him, remembrance in his gaze. Pushing the door open, they found the shop seemingly empty, with only an old man dozing behind the counter. He wore a cylindrical robe of translucent fabric and an apron tied at his waist. To Loren, the man shimmered with magical energy. His strength felt comparable to Professor McGonagall's. Hermione, seeing only an empty shop, frowned. "Isn't this a goods store? Where are all the items?" The old man chuckled awake. "Because someone bought out all the alchemical products. They were eager to enter a newly discovered tomb." Hermione's eyes widened as she glanced at the figure who had appeared in the corner. Loren listened, taking in the details. "Everything sold here is alchemical?" he asked. Yes, pottery jars that can bind names to curses, cat's eyes used to locate treasures, staffs that repel water, but they're all sold out now. The man shook his head and with a slightly accented English, added, Many wizards have come lately, but young wizards like you are rare. Hermione tugged at Loren and whispered, Professor McGonagall said Professor Babbling was eager to come to Egypt for the newly excavated ruins. Loren's eyes flicked to the old man in the corner. Flamel's phantom floated behind him, excited and whispering in a voice only Loren could hear. He's from the Alchemy Research Center. Reveal your identity as an alchemist. Flamel had never been so unrestrained before. Loren hesitated, then stepped forward. Without doubt, this is no mere lie, but the most certain truth. Those words were the opening line of the Emerald Tablet, the motto of the Egypt Alchemical Research Center, unearthed around the tablet itself, and representing the core truth of alchemy. The old man smiled at Loren's words and shook his head. Young man, if you had come a month ago, I might have gladly led you down into our laboratories to show you our latest work. Maybe in 3 months it would be possible, just not right now. Flamel's spirit faded into nothing. A touch embarrassed, Loren bowed slightly. That's all right. We didn't insist on going into the center. We mainly came for directions. The old man nodded and leaned back, as if considering what to tell them next. 268. A chance encounter with Professor Barbling at Gringotts. After hearing their story, the old man nodded, his face non-committal. He didn't seem entirely convinced. He stooped and reached under the counter, pulling out a parchment from a box. I'll give you a free map, he said, placing it on the counter. It marks some buildings in the Hurghada district and the newly opened pyramids. For the sake of alchemy, young man, my advice is to stay away from those unexplored pyramids. I read about it in a book, Hermione said mysteriously. In 1916, a British lord opened Tutankhamun's tomb in Egypt, and they said it was cursed. 20 people who entered the tomb died unnatural deaths within 5 years. The old man smiled. They weren't killed by a curse. Loren felt a pang of unease, but replied earnestly, We only want to visit the Wizarding Street. We won't go stumbling into ruins. The old man said nothing more. He laid the parchment on the counter, then slowly sat back in his corner. His figure began to blur. Disillusionment charm? Hermione murmured. It's a bit different from the disillusionment charm, but similar in principle. Loren caught the faint trail of magic in the air. Let's go. They took the parchment and slipped out of the shop quietly. I always find the atmosphere in that place a little oppressive, Hermione said with a sigh of relief. I expected a magical entrance to the Wizarding District here, like the Leaky Cauldron or Platform 9 3/4. Maybe there is a hidden entrance, Loren said, but we're not allowed in. He glanced back. The Hermes General Store still shimmered with that strange, dazzling brilliance. Half an hour later, following the map, they walked along a tributary of the Red Sea toward the entrance to the Wizarding District. To their left lay an endless sea of sand. To the right, a gurgling river. Between them there was nothing. No weeds, no vegetation. Traces of industrial civilization thinned out. Road signs disappeared. Eventually, only a desolate path remained. After an uncounted distance, they began to lose any sense of how far they'd walked. It felt both like they had gone very far and like they had never left the same spot. Just as Loren checked the map again, an obelisk appeared ahead, standing between sand and water. Its reflection in the river formed a second obelisk, and together they framed a gateway, the entrance lying between them. Half of the gateway sat in the water, its surface shimmering with ripples. Loren and Hermione exchanged looks, pleasantly surprised. They stepped through the gap between the obelisks. As a shadow passed, a cool, flowing sensation washed over them, and their view opened up. Before them stretched a winding, endless street paved with limestone, the same earthy yellow as the stone of the pyramids. It was all Egyptian charm, shopfronts gilded in bold, mostly painted in gold, with a rough, striking style. The obelisk they'd come through slowly closed behind them, reverting to an ordinary stone. The nearest shop sold magical supplies. A dark-skinned, plump witch stood outside, shouting in broken English, "Salamander tails, 10 sickles an ounce. Basilisk tongues, 16 sickles an ounce. Come see." Hermione craned her neck to look at everything, but Loren tugged her back. 16 sickles an ounce? They must be mad. Hmm? Is something wrong? Hermione looked puzzled, a little wry. She wasn't sensitive to the prices of magical ingredients. Dragon liver is only that price. Her brief impatience dissolved as the street pulled her in. It was livelier than she'd imagined. Merchants shouted constantly. Customers haggled animatedly. Camel hooves clattered on the flagstones and bells jingled at their necks. People in every kind of dress wandered past. Wizards in robes, cloaked figures hiding their faces, mysterious witches in wide-brimmed hats and scarves, noisy dwarves, goblins, house elves. Most eye-catching were the local Egyptian wizards, bare-chested in white loincloths. Their wands were inlaid with golden rings, resembling the pharaoh's scepters in museum displays. How amazing, completely different from Diagon Alley, Hermione breathed, her eyes bright with curiosity. A series of harsh squawks drew their attention to a plain-looking shop. The sign bore Egyptian script Hermione couldn't read. Inside, beams of wood hung with bird cages, black-headed white ibises, crested ibises, falcons, vultures. A vulture flapped and lashed out with a shriek. Hermione recoiled. As they moved away, Hermione grew bold again and spoke to Loren in a professorial tone. Owls don't adapt to the desert, so wizards here use ibises and falcons for mail, and sometimes vultures. Long ago, Egyptians saw wizards using sacred ibises and falcons for messages and took them for divine messengers. That led to worship and even the hawk-headed human-bodied deity, Horus. How knowledgeable, Professor Granger, Loren said lightly. Several local boys pressed their noses to a shop window where brooms were displayed. Posters advertised the latest flying broom in several languages. This high-speed broom features a streamlined design, a premium ash wood handle, hand-engraved serial number, and carefully selected birch twigs at the tail for balance and precision. The Firebolt can go from 0 to 150 miles per hour in 10 seconds and shows near-magical braking performance. Price negotiable. English was rare here. Hermione read the description carefully, then turned to Loren. Let's get Harry's birthday present here. He loves broomsticks. Birthday present. Then Loren remembered. Harry's birthday was coming up soon. He peered at the price tags, 3-digit figures in galleons and up. Are you sure? Not a broom. Hermione slipped into the shop. They sell broom maintenance kits. We'll pick something Egyptian for him. But, Loren hesitated, the Weasleys are in Egypt too. They'll probably buy Egyptian souvenirs. Won't we risk getting the same things? Oh, Hermione slapped her forehead. I forgot about that. But Ron probably won't pick the same thing as us, will he? In the end, Hermione chose a broom care toolkit for Harry and a retired bludger signed by the Egyptian Quidditch seeker Loya Zaglul for Ron. At the counter, Hermione suddenly realized they didn't have enough galleons. The coins they'd exchanged last term were nearly gone, and they hadn't been to Gringotts this semester. The assistant at the counter was polite and smiled despite their empty pockets. Perhaps the language barrier helped. The assistant looked at their selections, then sighed theatrically. Why doesn't Gringotts have checks? Loren smiled. He'd worried about this the moment they went into the shop. They couldn't even afford a single broom hair, let alone a 3-digit broom. Besides, Gringotts in Egypt hadn't made any exchange agreement with the British Ministry of Magic, so they wouldn't convert Muggle money for Hogwarts students. But they had options. Loren's pendant held valuable materials, unicorn hair, basilisk scales, basilisk fangs, and even finished potions. Gringotts' goblins would take anything valuable. Let's go to Gringotts first, exchange some items, then come back, he said. We can get galleons here, right? Don't ask too many questions. I have a plan. Loren smiled, nodded to the assistant, and led Hermione toward Gringotts at the end of the street. Among the gilded shops, the snow-white Gringotts building stood out, nearly identical to the one in Diagon Alley. The gleaming bronze doors, goblin attendants in scarlet and gold. The only difference was a warning on the silver door written in Arabic. 2 goblins bowed as they approached and ushered them into the tall marble trading hall, where long counters sat attended by rows of goblins serving customers. After 2 years of exchanging currency, they navigated Gringotts with familiarity and went straight to a counter. Hello, Loren said to an unoccupied goblin. I have some things I'd like to sell. Hello, sir, the goblin replied briskly. Gems, precious metals, valuables, Gringotts will make a fair offer. Do you buy unicorn hair? Loren had a clump of older unicorn hair from Hagrid, low-grade and stained, gathering dust. He'd saved it to exchange. The goblin's eyes brightened. Unicorn hair. Of course we need it, esteemed guest. But, the goblin added, rubbing his hands as if embarrassed, I must see it first and judge it by condition before I make an offer. Of course. Loren reached inside his collar and produced a large mass of unicorn hair, setting it on the counter. It didn't look impressive, grubby, tarnished with mildew from wood shavings, its white dulled to gray, a faint, unpleasant smell left by Fang. The goblin wrinkled his nose, picked out a strand, and peered through a magnifying glass. It is unicorn hair. He set the mass down and wiped his slender hand on a rag. His earlier eagerness cooled to something like disdain. In the market, high-quality mane hair is 10 galleons a strand. 10 galleons a strand, Hermione cried. A messy clump like that could contain hundreds or thousands of strands, nearly 10,000 galleons. The goblin tapped the clump with a fingernail. This is common hair, several years old and lacking vitality. Altogether, I can offer 300 galleons. Before Loren could begin to haggle, a cool, elegant voice cut in from the next counter. Has Gringotts stooped this low? A woman in a black witch's robe sat adjacent, hood shadowing her face. She lowered it to reveal a striking, mature beauty and a poised figure that made Hermione take a second look. On the sleeve of her robe was the familiar Hogwarts crest, 4 animals, a lion, snake, badger, and eagle, surrounding the letter H. Loren opened his mouth, then Hermione gave him a quick shake of the head. The goblin bristled. Excuse me, guest, if you have needs, please find an available counter. Do not interfere with my work. The woman watched him, tapping her bright red fingernails on the counter. I'm giving you one chance to make a proper offer. Think carefully before you speak. The goblin's tone grew defensive. Guest, you cannot interfere in other customers' business. She is our elder. She can act on our behalf, Hermione said decisively. The woman's smile widened at that. Loren noticed, with a slight thrill, that the points where her fingernail tapped formed a subtle, simple rune if connected, something like the watchful gaze of a lion, a rune meant to influence perception. The casual precision of it impressed him. Such discreet rune work required both skill and deep knowledge. He realized, with a twinge of regret that he hadn't taken ancient runes as an elective, that this must be Professor Bathsheba Barbling, the ancient runes professor at Hogwarts. The goblin began to sweat. All right, please wait, esteemed guest. He fumbled with the hair clump, trying to count strands and calculate value. At market price, top of the mane and high-quality tail hair are 10 galleons per strand. Hair from other parts is 7 sickles per strand. Here, in total. He panicked and couldn't get a coherent count. His hands trembled. Professor Babbling tapped the ball of unicorn hair with her wand. The tangled mass unfurled smoothly, separating into neat strands that fell across the counter. The goblin teller counted carefully. Esteemed guest, there are 517 strands of high-quality unicorn hair and 924 strands of ordinary unicorn hair. The total comes to 5,550 galleons and 8 sickles, including depreciation and impurity loss. It glanced up at Professor Babbling, hesitated, then continued only when it read no displeasure on her face. After accounting for depreciation and impurity loss, the price is 5,400 galleons. Does that suit you? That's an enormous difference from the first quote, Hermione breathed, staring. The goblin's body trembled. It dared not say more. Babbling withdrew the finger that had been tapping the table and nodded once toward Loren. That's Gringotts' standard price. If you sell to a shop that specializes in magical materials, you might get more, but stores outside Gringotts often can't handle such a large payment in coin. They may want to barter. The choice is yours. Fine, we'll take that price. Loren wanted the matter settled. The goblin wiped an invisible bead of sweat from its forehead and forced a relieved smile. Would you like to withdraw all of it in coin? We can deposit the galleons directly into your vault. If you haven't opened an underground vault at Gringotts in Diagon Alley yet, now's a fine time to do it. Gringotts is worthy of your trust. An underground vault. Loren looked thoughtful. The space in the pendant could hold all the galleons, but he didn't trust the idea of carrying a fortune about. If word got out, it would attract trouble. Could he open a vault in Diagon Alley from here in Egypt? Can I open a Gringotts vault at Diagon Alley, London, from here? We're only passing through Egypt. Of course. The goblin hopped down from its high stool and slipped through a door at the back of the main hall. At last, the three Hogwarts visitors had a little privacy. Loren and Hermione looked at the woman beside them. "You're Professor Babbling, Ancient Runes, aren't you?" they said together. "If Headmaster Dumbledore doesn't fire me over the summer, then yes," she replied with a small, amused smile. "How do you know us?" Hermione blinked. "We haven't taken your class yet." Professor Babbling's smile widened. "The famous Miss Know-It-All and Loren Morgan. Believe me, everyone at Hogwarts knows you." Hermione colored and smiled shyly. The reunion was interrupted by the goblin, who popped back out of the door carrying a golden key and a roll of papyrus. After a comic scramble up onto the stool, it laid them on the counter and presented them with a flourish. "Esteemed guest, this is the Gringotts Vault contract. Sign your true name here, and this golden key will be yours. A private room in the Diagon Alley vault will be exclusively for you." Loren took the papyrus and read. The contract turned out to be far more considerate to the living than he had expected. Thorough security, coverage for man-made losses like robbery, theft, fire, or magical explosions while within Gringotts' walls, inheritance by direct relatives, clear clauses about long untouched vaults reverting to Gringotts after 200 years. It was, however, harsh on the dead. Ghosts had no property rights, and an unclaimed vault could be absorbed into the bank's holdings. "Don't be fooled by the niceties," Professor Babbling muttered, glancing at the teller. "Even this contract exists because the International Confederation forced the goblin's hand. They're nothing if not greedy." Loren watched the goblin and thought of the sword of Gryffindor, forged by the goblin Ragnuk, and the old quarrel around it. Greed could be constrained by force and by contract, but only if you could make the terms stick. He dipped the quill, signed his true name, and as the last stroke met the ink, a thin golden thread rose from the parchment and coiled around his smallest finger. It felt like a trace, slightly stronger. He guessed he could wash it away with a brief exposure to the Philosopher's Stone if he needed to. "Congratulations, esteemed guest," the goblin trilled, tucking the papyrus away and pressing the golden key into his hand. "Keep this safe. You will need it any time the vault is accessed." By the time the paperwork was finished, Loren and Hermione left Gringotts with 400 galleons in hand and a deposit of 5,000 galleons in their new vault. Professor Babbling suggested they go to a nearby pub to talk. A giant, ancient magical ruin has been discovered in a newly found pyramid, she told them over a steaming drink. It's wrapped in complex spatial magic. Excavations can be made from many directions. Historians have been coming in, but no one's found the core chamber. Gringotts curse breakers are experts at this. I came to speak with them about a possible collaboration. She took a grateful gulp of what she called Irish coffee. Thank Merlin for that. At least this place has Irish coffee. In front of Loren and Hermione sat 2 glasses of an unappealing violet liquid. "Don't look so put out. Minerva loves this," Babbling teased. Hermione's face lit up at the mention of Professor McGonagall, and the bland drink suddenly seemed rather stylish. She sipped through a straw and made a discreet mental note to recommend better drinks to McGonagall later. "Why tell us all this?" Loren asked at last. Babbling ordered another drink before replying. "Gringotts and its greedy goblins are going after the ruins for wealth. I don't trust them. I happened to meet you two, top students of your year, so I wondered if you'd be willing to serve as my assistants on the excavation." Hermione's eyes shone. Loren hesitated, then said, "An old man once told me it's best to stay far away from uninvestigated ruins." The enthusiasm slipped from Hermione's face as she remembered the odd warnings from Hermes's Emporium and the lurid tales in the less reliable books. Professor Babbling raised an eyebrow. "Don't underestimate me. I will guarantee the safety of my students." Her confidence was quiet and absolute, and neither of them were surprised. Ancient magic was dangerous and powerful, but Babbling was clearly experienced. "You can think on it for 2 days," she said. "If you accept, meet me at the Gringotts entrance at 9 o'clock in the morning 3 days from now. I have something else to do," Babbling said as she pulled up her hood and rose, but she didn't get far. "But Loren began. She waved one hand without turning. I'm not collaborating with those Gringotts people, but I don't mind walking with them a little. Then, looking sheepish, she added, I suppose I ought to pay the bill. Hermione giggled and punched Loren's shoulder. You teased her deliberately, she said. Loren laughed. After settling the tab, they left the pub and then with a muffled pop, apparated away from the wizarding street. Later that evening, in their hotel suite, Loren lay on the sofa reading, a book half covering his face. He breathed evenly through the pages. Hermione sat cross-legged beside him, absorbed in a history of ancient Egyptian magic, Volume 3. The safety promise from Professor Babbling had calmed them. They'd both agreed to join the excavation with little hesitation. Not having much specific information about the site, Hermione and Loren spent the next days poring over books on Egyptian magic. Some they'd brought, others bought on Hurghada's wizarding street. Hearing Loren's steady breathing, Hermione removed the book from his face and set it aside, then tucked a blanket over his stomach. The desert grew cold at night. Losing sleep to cold could bring a nasty chill. Loren, half asleep, fumbled and pushed the cashmere blanket away. Hermione smoothed it back. He pushed it again. After a few more attempts, he settled and stopped fighting it. She turned back to her reading. The section she had been on discussed magic during the reign of Ramses II. It recounted a wizard called Moses who, moved by pity for slaves, used powerful magic to force Ramses to release them, parting the Red Sea to let slaves pass and then allowing the waters to drown their pursuers. The episode, the book said, led many Egyptian wizards to hide their magic from ordinary life, recognizing that using magic to help one group might mean harming another. Hermione's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the hotel door locking. She nudged Loren. They're back. Wake up. Loren rubbed his face, swung his legs out of the slippers, and padded to the door. How was it? Did you catch anything? His father's voice came through the door, excited. How did you know I caught a 13-pound fish? The hotel will prepare it for us for free. That'll be our lunch tomorrow. The fish here are remarkably stupid, Loren declared. It's not the fish that's stupid, his father said proudly. It's my skill. I've mastered sea fishing. They went on, talking about wind, the yacht's engine, rods and lines, the small, contented chatter of people who had spent the day at sea. Hermione smiled and turned a page. 3 mornings later, the Hurghada Wizarding Street was quiet and cool. After breakfast, they apparated back and arrived by 8. Loren complained theatrically as they waited. You dragged me here so early. Now we have to stand around for an hour. He jabbed Hermione lightly in the triceps with a small, playful punch. Despite his tone, he was smiling. Hermione swatted his hand away with a mock-exasperated sk. We could browse the shops. Must we just stand here like idiots? Oh, Loren said, mock-chastened. He counted the strikes, 1 for her, dozens for him, and grinned. The street woke slowly. Some shops were still closed. Others were sweeping sand from their thresholds. Occasional gusts of enchanted wind, the effects of a whirlwind sweep, thrust sand into the morning air, which the light breeze carried away. They settled to wait, the little buzz of anticipation already sharpening into something like excitement. 270. Into the pyramid. They did not go far before they drifted into the shops around Gringotts. It was early. The street was nearly empty, and shopkeepers still looked half asleep. The clerk at the magic supplies shop only muttered a greeting when they came in and then retreated behind the counter, doing little to help. Loren leaned in to examine the shelves of gold bracelets and earrings, and 2 items caught his eye. A golden mask that supposedly let the wearer breathe underwater, and a golden scepter that claimed to regulate the surrounding temperature. Hermione checked the price tags and blinked. So cheap, only 1 galleon each. Loren picked up the scepter and inspected it closely. He'd learned enough alchemy to know a little about how such items were made. It isn't real gold, it's brass. And look at the magic circles. Those lines were drawn with the bodily fluids of magical creatures. They'll lose their power in 3 to 5 years. He set the scepter down and took the mask. Same thing, cheap materials, cheap magic. No wonder. Hermione hesitated, then asked, What do you mean by bodily fluids? Loren clicked his tongue. Blood, sweat, saliva, even urine. Hermione stared at him. You don't have to learn that, and don't ever use urine. Loren blinked, then laughed. In the end, they bought the mask and scepter, and a few Egyptian-style cauldrons, bigger and more bulbous than British cauldrons, more like pottery jars. An hour later, they were back at Gringotts to meet Professor Babbling. She was wearing a fitted black robe that set off her figure, the hood pulled up, giving her a composed, mature look. "You've been waiting long, haven't you?" she said with a smile as she approached. Behind her walked a goblin and a wizard in Gringotts uniforms. The goblin was tiny in a smart little suit, long pointed ears, a cone-shaped nose, and thick, sharp nails. The wizard drew their attention more, tall, with long, fiery red hair and a ponytail, a small fan-shaped earring, and dragon-hide boots. He looked like he belonged at a rock concert rather than a bank. Loren's gaze lingered on the hair, and he felt a faint hunch of recognition. Before anyone spoke, the goblin let out a rasping yell. "Two children? Babbling. That's a dangerous pyramid tomb, not somewhere for young wizards to poke around." "They are my assistants," Babbling said coolly. "And don't forget the agreement. If there's danger inside the pyramid, I can withdraw at any time." She turned and introduced them with a bright smile. "This is your senior, Bill Weasley. He's a curse-breaker at Gringotts now, and these are Loren Morgan and Hermione Granger." Bill stepped forward and shook their hands. "Hello, I suppose you recognized my hair already." Loren smiled. "Ron always talks about his brother. 12 owls, right? Professor Babbling said you two were top of your year. When you do well, people talk about it for years." Bill grinned and laughed. "Is that supposed to be a blessing?" Hermione said it sounded very nice. Bill's laugh warmed up. "Exactly. Consider it a blessing. You two are just as Ron described. I'll remember you." Loren started to say, "By the way, Ron," but the goblin cut him off with a sudden shriek. "Enough!" The goblin, Lockjaw, had been holding himself in. The outburst practically echoed. "If you're planning a reunion here, not now!" "Calm down, Mr. Lockjaw." Babbling tried to placate him, though her tone only seemed to rile him. Then his greed showed through. "I don't care about the pyramid's secrets," he snarled, then brightened into a greedy grin. "I want the pure gold cap. Bring it back to Gringotts." Bill explained for the two who didn't know. This pyramid simply appeared from folded space, still as it was when completed thousands of years ago. The cap is pure gold, probably weighs tens of thousands of pounds. The goblins at Gringotts have been dreaming about it. "For the sake of a good night's sleep," Babbling said dryly, "we'd better get it." "For the gold," Lockjaw chittered and produced a silver key. "A port key. You know how it works." They gathered, pressed their index fingers to the key, and it was cold under their skin. Hermione wondered briefly why they hadn't just apparated. This close, it should be fine, but the port key activated instantly. It did not feel like apparition. Instead, there was a sudden yank from their navels, as if a hook tugged them forward with irresistible force. They were lifted and hurled like wind, their fingers held tight to the key. After a moment, long enough to feel weightless and nauseous, they hit the ground. Loren and Hermione staggered and steadied each other. Babbling and Bill landed cleanly. Lockjaw tumbled in with a pitiful squeal. "Every time I use a port key with tall people, it's like this," he complained. They found themselves in a makeshift tent, white tarpaulins strung over wooden frames. Bill helped the goblin up and explained the obvious. The pyramid's interior has powerful spatial magic. Apparition is interfered with, and a port key can only bring us this far. If we use flying magic, the pyramid will detect it and might attack. We'll have to walk the rest. "The goblin-made port keys are the best. They land closest," Lockjaw boasted as he dusted sand off his suit. "Those old wizards at the Alchemy Research Center have to walk 2 more hours." Babbling didn't miss a beat as she pushed open the tent flap. "The rest of the way isn't short." They stepped out into an endless sea of sand. Dunes rolled in wave after wave. The sun sat high, and heat shimmered on the horizon. Lockjaw's short legs made the crossing slower and more arduous. He grunted to keep up. Loren asked about Ron and their friends. Bill said they were off experiencing Muggle life in Cairo, and that Loren should take a long vacation after the job. Bill wiped his brow, drew his wand, and conjured a gentle breeze that evaporated some of the sweat from their skin. Babbling layered more charms, so a strip of cooler air followed the group. After a long walk, the dunes opened and they saw the pyramid, a white structure rising from the sand, a smooth limestone shell with a golden cap that flashed like a beacon in the sun. Good eye, Babbling told Hermione when she pointed out that pyramids were often clad in white limestone. The wind and sand simply wore it away over time. This one's been hidden in another dimension until the shell's magic failed. They reached the base and craned their necks. The pyramid was immense, a square-based mass maybe 500 feet high, pristine white with gold at the peak. The entrance is there, Babbling said, pointing to a 30-foot-high opening on the sloped face. We'll climb the stone steps to it. No flying magic, nothing that will attract the golden light at the top. It will strike down anything airborne. As wind scoured the sand, the remnants of bones flashed and were bare reminder. They climbed the slope, entered the opening, and immediately the sunlight and heat shut away. A long, downward-sloping passage stretched ahead, swallowed by shadow. Lockjaw leaned on the wall, panting. "Goblins aren't made for this," he muttered. "Why not just send some hired adventurers from Gringotts?" "Because the gold's worth going for," he answered himself, and sped up. Bill pulled out his wand and whispered, "Lumos." A soft, silvery light formed at its tip and washed the tunnel in faint glow. Lockjaw's voice rang off the stone. "This tunnel leads straight to the abandoned burial chambers. The Alchemy Research Center found an entrance in the middle and went to the pyramid's second burial chamber." Babbling added, "They think there's a first burial chamber too, probably beneath the cap." Bill swept the light ahead. "There are other rooms here. The passage hides magical mechanisms. Trigger one, and you might be transported to another chamber. Most rooms are safe, though the burial chambers are dangerous. If you answer the Sphinx mummy's riddles, it gives you treasures and a way out." Hermione listened, frowning. "What if we can't answer? You get mummified." Lockjaw squealed theatrically. Hermione edged closer to Loren without realizing it. The goblin's words had the intended scare. As she shifted, a strange tugging magic gathered around them, the same navel-hook feeling from the portkey. Loren and Hermione looked at each other and, without thinking, grasped hands, fingers lacing together. Babbling noticed the magic gathering and raised her voice before it could take them away. "Don't try to answer questions you can't answer. If you're pulled into a room, leave until you find a riddle you can solve." 271. Something is wrong with Professor Babbling. Then don't answer. Find a room where you can answer the questions. With their feet on solid stone again, Loren and Hermione still had Professor Babbling's shouts ringing in their ears. They stood close together, wands out, scanning the darkness warily. It was pitch black, but neither of them lit their wands hastily. They held their breath and listened. Loren blinked. In the dimness, 2 points of crystalline blue light flared and vanished. His magical sight showed only a stone statue before them, giving off a faint glow. "On the bright side, at least teleporting inside a pyramid is better than a portkey," he said, easing a little as he twirled his wand to conjure a few blue flames. The flames hovered around them, shedding a soft, silk-like light that was warm and reassuring. He had avoided Lumos. Its light would be fixed to the wand tip, and he wanted the wand ready for anything. He turned to the small witch beside him and grinned. "Looks like Professor Babbling broke her promise. She couldn't protect us." "It's my fault," Hermione said, voice heavy with self-reproach. "Bill and Mr. Locke were ahead, and Professor Babbling was behind. That's the safest arrangement. If I hadn't moved, I wouldn't have triggered whatever that was." "Right then." Loren nodded. "Your punishment is to wash my socks this summer." "Who's going to be washing your socks? Is this the time for jokes?" Hermione couldn't help the smile tugging at her lips, despite the dim tomb and her own worry. Loren's offbeat joke eased some of the tension in her chest. "Okay, wash them after we get out," Loren said, and began to circle the chamber. It was a square room of huge stone blocks. One wall held a rectangular seam, clearly a doorway, but it was sealed by a single massive slab of stone. "Unless absolutely necessary, let's not touch that statue, shall we?" he suggested, moving to inspect the door. He tapped and knocked, but found no mechanism. Hermione tried apparition. Nothing. Like Hogwarts, apparition appeared forbidden here. Loren stepped back and studied the blocked door. "Do you think I could blast this open with Portaberto? Why do I feel like you can't wait to blow it open?" Hermione muttered, lowering her wand. "Let's examine the statue first. I have a feeling cracking that door will only cause more trouble. They approached the sculpture in the center. The sculptor had been either careless or odd. The figure had the body of a giant lion, huge paws, a long tail curled by its feet, the tip of the tail terminating in a raised sphere that looked like a ball of fur, but the head was unmistakably a woman's. "This looks like the Sphinx mummy Bill mentioned," Hermione said slowly, matching the statue to the picture she'd seen in a book. Loren tapped the stone with his wand and heard a muted, hollow sound. "It's hollow inside," he said, reaching out. The paw was cold and rough as stone, but the faint magical glow suggested it was more than mere carving. Then the statue blinked. Its eyes, carved almond shapes, seemed to roll, and the dormant glow along its bandaged surface flared brighter. Loren and Hermione exchanged a quick look and instinctively stepped back. Thin cracks spidered along the statue's outer shell. The tail creaked as it lifted, and the ball at its tip struck the stone platform. The outer stone peeled away in flakes to reveal the creature within. A true sphinx, massive and wrapped in long white bandages, the body of a lion and the head of a woman. It stared at them with wide, human-like eyes and spoke in a deep, hoarse voice. "Whoever disturbs the pharaoh's slumber, death will spread its wings and descend upon their head. Anyone who enters this tomb with impure heart, I will strangle like a bird." It pushed itself up on powerful hind legs and poised as if to pounce. "To leave this place, you must answer my riddle. If you guess correctly, even once, treasure I will give. Guess wrong, I will pounce. Refuse to answer. You will be imprisoned here forever." "This is a bit different from what Professor Babbling said," Loren remarked. Hermione's heart hammered. Guilt for having possibly led Loren into danger sharpened her resolve. She wanted to solve this riddle and get them out. "Can we hear the riddle?" she asked. The Sphinx scraped a claw across the stone floor, the sound like stones rubbing together, and chanted, "First, think of one who always wears a mask, acts secretive, weaving many lies. Then think of one who always bears a staff, who fools those beneath him and is fooled in turn. Find what both possess. Answer me. What makes them what they are?" Loren's eyes darted as he thought. Mask, staff. Hermione's mind raced too. She pictured the gilded mask and scepter she'd seen that morning. Acts secretive, full of lies. A sudden insight hit her. "The High Priest," she blurted. The Sphinx blinked and seemed to smile faintly. Encouraged, Hermione pushed on. "And one who fools inferiors and is in turn fooled by inferiors. That's the Pharaoh. They're both rulers in different ways. What they both possess, what makes them like that." "For power," Loren said softly. The answer came easily to him. All of it reminded him too clearly of Dumbledore. The Sphinx advanced without sound, its woman's face coming close enough that Hermione could smell the herbs and spices tucked into its bandages during mummification. "That is right. It is power." Hermione felt the Sphinx rub her forehead with its cool bandaged cheek. She tensed. For a moment she didn't know how to respond. The creature's next words seemed to catch in its throat. It stammered, as if bound by some thin, ancient contract, and fell silent, looking helpless for an instant. Then it looked at them again with a formal air. "Congratulations on answering correctly. The treasure I promised is in the first tomb chamber. You may take it. You may go." As it spoke, the massive slab sealing the chamber's entrance rumbled and began to rise slowly. Loren hesitated, not wanting to leave without asking whatever he could. "I have a few questions. Can you help me with them?" The Sphinx settled back into its former pose and shook its head. "All questions will have answers, but not now." Its active glow dimmed and went dormant once more. Loren urged, "At least tell us which way to go after we get out." The Sphinx's expression turned inscrutable and serene. If its tail had not been flicking behind it, Loren might have believed it lifeless. It offered no further speech. Silence followed. Loren pulled his wand out and said to Hermione, "Shall I try an opening charm?" He didn't get to find out. A rumbling came from the massive slab which had been opening. Now it was descending again. The Sphinx had spoken. "Stay and be trapped, or leave." "Let's go." Hermione grabbed Loren's sleeve and hurried him out. Neither wanted to linger. They only just stepped out when the slab slammed down and sealed the doorway in an instant. Outside, it was pitch black. They stayed close, hands pressed together, leaning on each other for warmth and calm. Loren noticed the ground tipped slightly. His right foot stood higher than his left, and he had to lean a little to keep his balance. "Lumos," Hermione murmured, and a soft white light sprang from the tip of her wand. She swept it around. The passage around them was built of carved stone blocks. They were back in the sloping corridor. "Which way do we go now?" she asked. Down would lead deeper into the pyramid. Up would take them toward the entrance. Loren watched the now sealed doorway they had just left. The slab blended seamlessly with the surrounding wall. The corridor stretched both ways, vanishing into shadow and hiding who knew how many similar chambers. "Up," Loren decided. "We'll wait for Professor Babbling at the entrance." "Okay," Hermione agreed. Though she was fascinated by ancient magical ruins, this one was clearly beyond their experience. They climbed up the slope, moving cautiously in case more teleportation or defensive magic triggered. "Maybe when we see Professor Babbling, we should withdraw from this project," Hermione said as they walked, keeping the Lumos raised. "Exploring ruins is something we can do after we graduate. Did you hear that?" Loren interrupted suddenly. Hermione froze and listened. From below came a rustling sound, steps slightly uneven. "Something's coming from down there," she whispered. "It can't be Professor Babbling and the others. If they're exploring or searching for us, they wouldn't be going up." Loren tightened his grip on his wand. "Try not to engage if we can avoid it. Fight in these passages could trigger more magic. Let's move faster and get out." They quickened their pace, but the sound followed them like a shadow, close enough to quicken their hearts. The sloping passage finally flattened, and ahead, a narrow opening showed faint light. They broke into a run and leapt through, only to find they had not come out into daylight, but into a vast, dark chamber. In the center lay a stone sarcophagus. Pottery jars crowded the corners, and the walls were inlaid with glowing gems. The light they'd seen hours ago had been gem fire. A short, stubby goblin led the group that entered next, followed by Bill, fashionable in his robes, and Professor Babbling in a close-cut robe. "Hermione, Loren, I'm so glad to see you," she cried as she strode up to them, scanning them carefully. Professor Babbling checked Hermione's forehead, where the Sphinx had touched her, and a flicker of doubt crossed her face before she smoothed it away. "You're all right. If anything had happened to you, Dumbledore would have fired me. Thank Merlin." Loren had noticed that tiny shadow of uncertainty and used his magical sight on Hermione's forehead. There were no curses or jinxes. Hermione still felt dazed. "Professor, weren't we heading up? How did we end up in a tomb chamber?" Bill explained. "The passages inside the pyramid are Y-shaped. A downward-sloping passage also connects to an upward one that opens into this second tomb chamber. So we weren't heading for the exit. We were heading deeper into the pyramid." Hermione's words were small. As Professor Babbling examined him, Loren kept watching her. There was a second flicker, a different kind of doubt in her eyes, as if she expected something to be wrong with him too. It felt odd, too odd. What professor would take such particular interest in two students about to enter their third year? What professor would invite them to assist in exploring a newly discovered magical ruin? The reunion felt unsettled. Questions crowded Loren's mind he wasn't ready to voice. 272. Bathita's Secret. "Since you two came out unscathed, let's get down to business," the goblin Griffook shrieked, his voice high and desperate. Professor Babbling seemed not to hear his tone. She reached out and gently ruffled Loren's and Hermione's hair. "If you wish to leave, I can send you out now." Loren's heart leapt. From Professor Babbling's odd behavior earlier, he had suspected she might have ulterior motives, but now that possibility faded. "Babbling." Griphook stretched out a finger and jabbed at her angrily. "This isn't what we agreed. It's only escorting them out of the pyramid. It won't take long. I'll do my best to help you explore the ruins afterward," Professor Babbling pouted. Loren and Hermione exchanged a look. Their eyes said what words did not. "No need, Professor," Loren said, shaking his head. "The last teleportation was an accident. We'll leave together once this exploration is finished." Babbling stroked their hair again, apology in her gaze. Griphook snorted twice, mollified by their sensible choice. Just then Bill's voice came from a corner of the tomb. "Come quickly. I've found something." They all crowded into the corner. Piled there were countless identical earthenware jars, slightly bulging in the middle and tapering toward the base, almost vase-shaped. Time had dulled their surfaces to a yellowish brown. The firing was crude. The lids were carved in 4 motifs: a baboon head, a jackal head, a human head, and a falcon head. Hermione wrinkled her nose at an old, earthy, fishy smell emanating from them, with a faint undercurrent of spices and medicinal herbs, the same scent she had noticed on the Sphinx mummy. Griffook's eyes lit up with greed. This is it! The men from the Alchemy Research Center were stopped by these jars. The wizardly texts the old researchers consulted say these jars contain the mummy's lungs, stomach, liver, and intestines. Put the 4 organs back in the sarcophagus, and the way to the first tomb chamber will open. Professor Babbling sniffed in annoyance. That's why they let Gringotts come in first. To scout, yes? Hermione frowned. How hard can it be? Just open a lid and look. These jars are under severe curses, Bill said, drawing his wand and holding Lumos. He scanned the pots. Touch the wrong jar, and your true name will appear on it. The jar and your name will turn to dust. As Gringotts' curse breaker, Bill had run into pottery curses before. Loren peered at the jars. A faint golden sheen threaded with black aura lay over each, and no clues revealed themselves. Is there any way to avoid the curse? Smash the jars, or levitate them and choose from a distance? No, Bill said. They're too sensitive. Any spell could destroy them outright. If the jars with the organs are broken, it could trigger further curses. He glanced at Professor Babbling. Professor, any ideas? Babbling pondered, then drew a detection rune with her wand. The rune became a glowing ribbon that circled the pile once, then returned to her hand, dispersing into tiny motes of light. She shook her head. No, it can't be detected. Hurry up and think of something. I didn't invite you here to fail. Griphook fretted, scratching at his ears. A mountain of gold lay beyond this door, but that door was blocked by these cursed jars. Hermione's face brightened. I have an idea. All eyes swung to her. Loren noticed that Babbling did not look surprised. What is it? Say it, the goblin demanded. Hermione pointed at one jar she felt was different. You can tell them by smell. I can smell the same spices and medicinal herbs on some of these jars as I smelled on the mummy. Griffook froze, then leaned forward and sniffed loudly, drawing a long, contented inhalation. Goblins have larger noses and a fine sensitivity to scent. He thought he should detect what Hermione did. After a long sniff, Griffook frowned. No, there's only that earthy, fishy smell. I don't get the spices. Professor Babbling only smiled faintly. Let Hermione try. Griffook bristled. Our goblin noses are dozens of times keener than yours humans. Babbling ignored him and gave Hermione an encouraging look. Loren shifted slightly, prepared to cast a counter-curse if needed. Hermione stepped forward and wrinkled her little nose. Guided by scent, she moved to the jar with the baboon head lid. This one, she said. Griffook leaned in to sniff again, then stepped back in genuine surprise. I still only smell the earth and fish. Professor Babbling didn't hesitate. She picked up the jar Hermione had indicated. It was intact. No name had appeared on it. Griffook touched his nose, suddenly unsure of his own race's reputed acuity. Bill and Loren leaned in and sniffed, shaking their heads. We only smell the same earthiness. Don't mind them, Babbling told Hermione. Keep going. Hermione pointed out 3 more jars. One by one, Babbling removed them. Jackal head, human head, falcon head. The goblin, Bill, and Loren each held one. With each jar taken safely, everyone had their own thoughts. Griphook doubted his talent. Bill hoped for an early finish to his shift. Hermione wondered why only she could sense the spices, and Loren watched Babbling closely. Babbling's expression was oddly distant. Now we just have to return these jars to the coffin. Don't worry, I checked. The sarcophagus is intact, Bill said, smiling. He hefted a jar, lifted his dragon-hide boot, and kicked the stone lid. With a grinding scrape, the sarcophagus opened. The mummy within was not grotesque. Wrapped neatly in yellow-gray burial shrouds from head to toe, nothing exposed. They placed the 4 jars into the coffin in the order Bill named: lungs, stomach, liver, intestines. The moment the last jar sat in place, the sarcophagus began to tremble. They all retreated a few steps. The lid, as if pulled by some strange gravity, slid back toward its original position, the entire sarcophagus shaking in sync. The stone tremors deepened until the sarcophagus seemed to fuse into a single solid block. The outer stone skin flaked away in pieces. The stone mass began to shrink. Puzzled, Loren and the others watched as the peeling stone continued inward. By their reckoning, the stone should already have exposed the hollow within, revealing the mummy and the 4 jars. But the stone kept peeling, as if revealing that it had been a whole block all along, not a hollow coffin. Eventually, the block shrank into the shape of a small pottery vessel, not the long organs jars, but a short, squat pot. It looked less like a jar than like a cauldron. "What's going on? Where's the door to the first tomb chamber? Where's my gold?" Griphook raged, unable to accept the outcome. He lurched forward to examine the small pot, but wary of curses, dared not touch it. Professor Babbling looked at it with an unreadable expression. "Mr. Griphook, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. This is not the door to the first tomb chamber. This is the door to our family's salvation." Griphook stared incredulously. "Bathsheba Babbling? What do you mean?" Loren and Hermione turned to the professor. Babbling's voice softened. "Let me tell you a story. Long ago, a group of escaped slaves lived here. They were plundered by neighbors, short of food and shelter, and needed a leader. A reclusive wizard nearby took pity on them and secretly chose a brave young man. With the wizard's aid, he united the people, resisted invaders, taught farming. He became a wise king. When he grew older and less strong, a powerful warrior rose to lead his armies. One day, the king met the warrior's wife, Bathsheba. At the name, Loren's chest tightened. Bathsheba, did this explain Babbling's own name? Professor Babbling continued. The king fell for Bathsheba's beauty. He had an affair with her and fathered a son. To hide the scandal, he had the general murdered and took Bathsheba as his queen. The wizard who had helped them was appalled. He unleashed the cauldron's wrath on the king and left a curse in his bloodline. The firstborn of every generation would die young, and the rest would perish in war. The descendants tried intermarrying with other wizards to escape it, but the curse persisted, all because of this magic cauldron. This cauldron appears in other famous tales. When Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, the cauldron released blood into the Nile, plagues of pests and disease. Even the plague that struck the firstborn. Hermione gasped. The 10 plagues of Moses. I read about that. Professor Babbling stared at the black stone pot as if enchanted. Some call those events the 10 plagues of Egypt, or of Moses. I prefer to call them the 10 plagues of the cauldron. So, Professor, what is your relation to Bathsheba? Loren asked. I am descended from Bathsheba, Babbling said slowly, but not from Bathsheba and the king. In the king's later years, Bathsheba had other descendants, but they too inherited the cauldron's curse. To warn the future, the women of that line were all named Bathsheba. My eldest brother died of dragonpox shortly after birth. My second brother fell under a Death Eater's wand. Only I have survived to this day. How did you find this cauldron? Bill asked. Babbling replied, To fight the curse, I studied ancient magic and became proficient in ancient runes. I became the ancient runes professor at Hogwarts. So you found this place in a book? Hermione asked. No. Babbling smiled wryly. After Professor Trelawney got drunk during a divination class, I took her back to the North Tower to sleep it off. In her sleep, she spoke a prophecy. It pointed to this time, this place, and the students who would meet me here. I thought that student meant you, Bill, until I saw you two at Gringotts. She looked at Hermione with gratitude. I'm sorry to have dragged you into this. I know you chose ancient runes. As compensation, I'll teach you well next semester. Hermione felt a cold premonition she could not name. The goblin Lockjaw, who had been watching from the edge, asked nervously, Babbling, so what are you going to do next? Remove the curse, Babbling said. Bathsheba's sin was punished. Her descendants shouldn't pay for it. She stepped forward, crouched, and lifted the cauldron's lid. A sickly, bloody mist surged out, thick and foul, instantly filling the chamber. Lockjaw barked, What's going on? Babbling, you'll kill us. Babbling quietly cast the bubblehead charm over the group. You won't die. To cast the curse, the wizard once put sand from this land and water from the Nile into the cauldron and added the 10 plagues. Let it release them again. This first is the plague of blood, fresh blood of many kinds of livestock and people. It won't directly harm us. What about the curse on you, Professor? Loren asked. That mummy, she said. Once it turns to ash, the curse will be broken. The red mist dissipated as she spoke, replaced by swarms of frogs, lice, flies, and locusts that spilled from the cauldron. Hermione cried out and reflexively cast a small ring of flame around herself. Though it wasn't necessary, these plagues crumbled into dust on their own. "These are the plagues of frogs, lice, flies, and locusts," Babbling explained. Two foul mists followed, livestock pestilence and boils. A black mist seeped out that even the bubblehead charm barely kept at bay. Loren and Bill coughed as it brushed them, darkness and the plague on the firstborn. Finally, a gust of sand and wind rushed forth, carrying an unbearable stench of decay under the hidden scents of herbs and spices. Babbling removed her own bubblehead charm and stepped into the blast, open-armed. When the dust settled, the floor was covered in ash, and the pile of pottery jars in the corner was gone. With the curse lifted, Babbling's features relaxed. "All right, Hermione, this cauldron is yours now." Hermione stared. "Mine?" Lockjaw shrieked in outrage. "What's hers? That belongs to Gringotts. It belongs to the goblins." "You can try to take it," Babbling said coldly to him. Then she turned to Hermione. "Only you could smell those jars. That means the pyramid recognized you. Only you can take this cauldron." Hermione hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't want it. From what you described, Professor, I only see the disasters and curses. I don't need it." "You are its owner, whether you accept it or not," Babbling said with a strange smile. "When you need it, it will appear for you." Loren's eyes narrowed. He felt there was more in her words than she said. "Let's go. It's time to head back." Babbling and Bill led the way out. Loren and Hermione followed. "Hey, my gold! Where's my gold?" Griffook wailed. Bill waved a hand behind him. "Mr. Griffook, I'm off duty. You can look for it yourself." Griffook refused to give up. He glared at the black stone cauldron lying on the floor, gritted his teeth, and tried to drag it away, only to stumble. The cauldron suddenly sprouted a pair of brass feet and began to hop, bouncing higher than the goblin. It hopped into the ash pile at the wall and disappeared. Griphook rubbed his eyes and looked again. Nothing. Reluctantly, he had no choice but to trail after the others, muttering, "Wait for me. Wait for me." In the passage, Hermione froze. The disjointed words the Sphinx mummy had whispered while they were trapped came back to her, now clear in her mind. "Remember, do not be corrupted by power. Even 100 kinds of herbs and spices cannot mask the stench of decaying corpses." Why had the Sphinx said that? Why had it chosen her when Loren had been the first to answer its riddle? Questions crowded her mind, but there were no answers. She shook her head to clear it and hurried to catch up with Loren. They descended one corridor and climbed another, and at last they emerged from the pyramid. The sun was low, painting the desert gold. Loren took Hermione's hand and helped her down the last stone step. They stood together on the warm sand and shared a small smile. On the walk back, Professor Babbling asked suddenly, "Bill, can you help us keep this secret?" Hermione looked up at her, puzzled. Loren squeezed Hermione's hand and signaled her not to speak. Bill raised an eyebrow and smiled. "Of course." Griffook's expression flickered with panic when Babbling's gaze passed to him. "I can too. Babbling, don't play games. I'm the manager of Gringotts. Obliviate." And with that, something in Griffook's memory of the day was smoothed away. The Wizard and the Hopping Pot. Once upon a time, there was a kindly old wizard who used his magic generously and wisely to help his neighbors. He never revealed where his power came from, claiming instead that his potions, spells, and antidotes all sprang from a small cauldron he called his lucky pot. People came from miles around with troubles, and the old wizard would stir the cauldron and set things right. He lived to a ripe old age, and then died, leaving everything to his only son. The son was nothing like his father. He sneered at those without magic and resented his father's habit of helping others. After his father's death, the son found a small package hidden in the old cauldron, his name written on it. He opened it expecting gold, but found only a single small soft shoe, not a pair. A scrap of parchment lay inside with the words, "My son, I sincerely hope you never have to use it." The son cursed his father's muddled ways, threw the shoe back into the cauldron, and used the vessel as a rubbish bin. That very night, an old farm woman knocked at his door. "My granddaughter has warts, sir," she begged. "Your father used to brew a salve in that cauldron." "Get out," the son shouted. "What do your child's warts have to do with me?" He slammed the door. A loud clanging came from the kitchen. He found the cauldron had grown a single brass foot and was hopping in the center of the floor. making a terrible noise. Worse, warts covered its surface. He backed away and tried spells to make it vanish, to clean it, to throw it out. Nothing worked. The cauldron hopped after him up the stairs, clang, 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 and would not be silenced. He spent the night awake as the wart-covered pot rattled by his bed. The next morning, the cauldron followed him to breakfast, banging on the floor. Someone knocked at the door, an old man. "My old donkey has been stolen, sir. Without it, we cannot take goods to market." "I'm still hungry," the son roared, slamming the door. Clang, clang, clang. The cauldron's noise was now mixed with braying donkeys and the groans of the hungry, sounds that seemed to come from within the cauldron itself. "Quiet," he shrieked, but his magic could not still it. That night a young woman stood at his door, weeping. "My baby is very ill," she pleaded. "Your father told me to come if I had trouble." He slammed the door on her too. The cauldron filled with salt water, brayed, groaned, sprouted more warts, and splashed tears across the floor. For days it continued, braying, retching, crying, howling, coughing, and spewing spoiled cheese, sour milk, and a flood of hungry slugs. The son could not eat or sleep. At last he could bear it no more. He ran into the village shouting, "Bring me all your troubles, all your distress, all your sorrow. I have my father's cauldron, and I will help." The cauldron hopped behind him, loud as ever. He moved through the houses using spells. Warts vanished from a little girl. A lost donkey returned from the heather. A sick baby woke rosy-cheeked after being sprinkled with dittany. In every house he helped the suffering, and slowly the cauldron beside him quieted, becoming clean and gleaming. When morning came, the cauldron let out a contented burp, spat the small shoe the son had thrown in at him, and stood still so he could put it on its brass foot. The son went home with the cauldron subdued, and from then on he helped his neighbors as his father had. Always careful the pot did not take off its shoe and start hopping again. The July holiday was hot and stifling. Nobody had watered the sycamore Bates had planted behind the courtyard for the past month. Some of its branches had withered under the sun. It wasn't dead, but it clung to life by a thread. Its leaves were dry and stiff, and every so often a gust of wind would make them rustle like crumpled paper. Bates was heartbroken. He ran to the garden shop every day asking how to revive it so it would bloom its purple pom-pom flowers next year. The Grangers' dental clinic was in chaos too. They had left patients unattended while they were in Egypt, and now that they'd returned and reopened the practice, they were swamped. For the last few days, they'd been having dinner at Loren's house while catching up on the backlog. Loren and Hermione had been laboring over their summer homework, especially Hermione. She'd completely reworked the outline for her History of Magic essay, intending to compress ancient Egyptian magic into a single paper. Loren joked that it would be a nightmare for old Professor Binns. On the morning of July 31st, at the Granger Villa in Hampstead Garden, Loren was lounging on the sofa with the phone to his ear. After the other end picked up, he said, "Hello? Hi, may I speak to Harry Potter?" A middle-aged woman's voice came back. "One moment. He's upstairs opening his birthday presents." The voice drifted away and lowered, then louder and higher. "Harry, your friend's on the phone." From further up the stairs, a smaller voice called, "Coming, Aunt Petunia." Footsteps thudded down, and the receiver was passed over. Harry's voice, bright with excitement, answered, "Hello. Happy birthday, Harry," Loren said, and that simple greeting broke Harry's silence. He launched into a stream of chatter. "Loren, I knew you were back. Hanch flew away 5 evenings ago and Errol didn't go look for it, but it delivered gifts and a birthday card this morning. I was wondering if I should call you. How was Egypt? Did you meet Ron? Oh, and thank you for the broom maintenance kit. I love it." Loren pulled the phone a little away and laughed. "You sound like you haven't talked to anyone in a month. If I could have gone to Egypt instead of staying here with my Muggle relatives, taking care of 2 owls that are fussy all the time, I wouldn't be this stir-crazy," Harry said, his voice flat. "What can I talk about? Telling Aunt Petunia about 14th century witch burnings? Telling Dudley about the headaches shrinking potion gives? I only have Hanch and Hathaway to talk to. They stay out all night." Loren went quiet for a moment, then coughed and shifted the subject. "How are things with your aunt and uncle? Still giving you headaches?" "Same as always," Harry sighed. "I can't accept their care. but I can't really get angry with them either. Aunt Petunia let me keep the upstairs room, and Uncle Vernon actually bought me a present and a cake, although most of the cake was eaten by Dudley. Aunt Petunia even wanted to take me to the zoo, but I said no. If someone had told me this 2 years ago, I'd have known I was dreaming. You told me last time to treat them like strangers, Loren said. Did you try that? I tried, but I can't do it, Harry admitted. Honestly, I'd rather they treated me like they did 2 years ago. That would be easier. There was a complicated mixture in Harry's voice, resentment, disgust, and a confusion at the awkward, unfamiliar kindness. Loren had no better advice than, if you don't like being around them, spend less time with them. That's what I do, Harry said. I stay in my room whenever I can. Speaking of which, I can't believe it. School starts in a month, and I've already finished my homework. Hermione will be so jealous, Loren said, laughing. She's having trouble with her History of Magic essay. Hermione struggling with a History of Magic essay? Harry scoffed. Her problem is deciding what to leave out. She's trying to condense ancient Egyptian magic into one paper, Loren said. She'll need more parchment than in the whole school year. Of course she would, Harry said. Is she there? I want to say hello. Hold on, Loren called into the study. Hermione, Harry's on the phone. Hermione came running out with a quill tucked behind her ear, took the receiver, and chirped, Harry, happy birthday. Thanks, Hermione. Harry's energy came back. He rattled off questions Loren hadn't answered. How was Egypt? Did you meet Ron? It's complicated, Hermione said. We didn't meet Ron, but we met his brother Bill. We met Professor Babbling from Ancient Runes and helped with an excavation in a pyramid. I can't say much. Professor Babbling asked us to keep it secret. She gave Loren a glare. He was doodling little turtles on his hand with a quill. Sounds amazing, Harry said, green with envy. How was your birthday? Fantastic. I loved the presents. Ron gave me a sneakoscope, and Sirius gave me a firebolt, perfect for testing your maintenance kit. Hearing that, Hermione went quiet for a moment, thinking about the price of broomsticks. Pureblood families were wealthy. She glanced at Loren's doodles. He'd been foolish enough to show off a little wealth, too. Have you got the school book list yet? Hagrid's already sent me the Care of Magical Creatures textbook. We haven't had an owl yet, Harry said. It'll come. Oh, Loren's birthday's coming up on August 6th. I'm not sure what to get him. He doesn't like Quidditch much. Any ideas? Hermione glared at Loren, who continued coloring the turtle shell on her fingernail. Anything from a friend is nice, she said. You're right. I'll think about it, Harry answered. A muffled sound came from the other end, and Harry's voice grew suddenly awkward. I have to go. I need to talk to my aunt and uncle about Aunt Marge staying here. Bye, Hermione. Good. Hermione's goodbye was cut off as the call ended. Loren watched Hermione wipe the little turtle drawings off her fingers with a cleaning charm. Then she pressed her clean, soft hand to Loren's face. Privet Drive, Surrey, Little Winging, 4 Privet Drive. Aunt Marge? Harry stood frozen by the table, as if struck. She's coming tomorrow? Aunt Marge was Uncle Vernon's sister. She lived in the country with a big garden and a pack of bulldogs. She didn't visit often, but when she did, her visits left a lasting, unpleasant impression on Harry. At Dudley's 5th birthday, she jabbed Harry's shin with her cane to stop him from winning a game. The year before Harry went to Hogwarts, he'd stepped on her dog's paw and been chased into the garden, scrambling up a tree. She hadn't called the dog back until after midnight. Dudley still laughed about that. Aunt Petunia wore a strange look. Harry couldn't remember what he'd said to Vernon. He only knew that for the week Marge would be staying, he had to behave like a normal middle-class boy. Harry trudged upstairs and gathered his birthday presents, cards, homework, and textbooks. Thanks to Loren's help with storage, he didn't have to worry about hiding things in the garden. He tucked everything away, then went to Hedwig's cage. Errol was there too, Ron's exhausted, elderly owl who'd had a busy night delivering gifts and was now asleep with his head under his wing. Hedwig, Hedwig, Harry said, gently nudging the snowy owl awake. I'm afraid you'll have to go away for a week. It'll be safer if you go with Errol back to Ron. I'll write Ron a note so he knows what's what. Hedwig's big amber eyes looked at him reproachfully, and Harry felt guilty. I'm sorry, but we can't have Aunt Marge finding you. 10 minutes later, Errol and Hedwig were out the window with a short note for Ron tied to one leg. The next morning at 9, Uncle Vernon announced, "All right, Petunia, I'm off to the station to fetch Marge." He stood up stiffly. "Dudley, want to come?" "No," Dudley snapped. "You look very smart today," Aunt Petunia cooed, smoothing Dudley's hair and urging him gently. "Maybe Aunt Marge will give you some pocket money." Dudley brightened, jumped up, and went with Vernon. Harry sat on the sofa, feeling numb. Dudley's video game lay ignored. Harry didn't care. Aunt Petunia went to put away Dudley's console and paused in front of him. "I don't really like Marge," she said quietly. "Huh?" Harry came back to himself. "She ruins the carpets and curtains. She uses expensive china for her dogs. Dog drool and urine everywhere, and I have to clean it up." "Why do you let her stay then?" Harry asked. "Because she's Vernon's sister," Petunia said, returning the controller to the cabinet and heading to the kitchen to make lunch. The television, disconnected from the game, reverted to a news broadcast. A newsreader was reporting, reminding the public that Lestrange and Peter are armed and extremely dangerous. A dedicated hotline has been opened. Anyone who sees either individual should report it immediately. A gravel crunch announced Uncle Vernon's car pulling into the drive. They shuffled in along the path. "Get to the door quickly," Petunia hissed at Harry. Harry went to open it. Aunt Marge filled the doorway, tall and stout like Vernon, a ruddy face and a slight mustache. One hand clutched a suitcase, the other an ill-tempered old bulldog. She marched past Harry without seeming to see him and kissed Petunia, with her chin, really, bumping into Petunia's cheek until Petunia winced and tears rose to her eyes. Vernon and Marge smiled as if it were a happy reunion. By the time Harry took Marge's suitcase upstairs and came back, they were sitting together having tea. The bulldog, Fang, slurped at a saucer in the corner, and Petunia's frown deepened as the dog splattered tea and dribbled on the floor. When Harry sat down, Fang barked at him, and Marge turned her attention to him for the first time. "Why are you still here?" she snapped. "Yes," Harry said, forcing a thin smile, thinking of Petunia's earlier words. "Don't be smug," Marge sneered. "You haven't improved since I last saw you. I hoped school might teach you manners." She took a large swallow of tea and wiped her mustache. "Vernon, where does that boy go to school again?" "Hogwarts, a top school for juvenile delinquents," Vernon said with a self-satisfied sniff. "Do they use whips at Hogwarts, boy?" Marge barked. "They do," Harry said, thinking of Mr. Filch's threats, and the corner of his mouth twitched as he added, "The caretaker hangs students by their thumbs and beats them." Petunia's eyes widened. That wasn't what Lily had told her. "Good," Marge said. "Some people need a proper thrashing. 99% of the time, a good whipping fixes things." She went on about writing the school to demand harsher punishments. Harry imagined Filch and Marge getting on famously. Filch certainly thought so. Of course, letters from parents to the school would be seen by Professor McGonagall or Headmaster Dumbledore, who would no doubt toss them in the fireplace. Still, Marge stayed on at number 4 Privet Drive, and she made a point of picking on Harry, shouting at him and sneering. "Vernon, don't blame yourself for how this boy turned out," she said at one point. "If the bones are rotten, it won't matter what you do. It's like dogs. The mother's faults show up in the puppies. The Potter woman was a disgrace. She ran off with a good-for-nothing, and look what she produced. Potter was a lazy, lying scum, and this little tramp is his spawn." Her voice rose. She peered at Harry and shrieked, "You rude, ungrateful little." Something inside Harry snapped. Anger surged up hot and fast. His hands trembled, and his head throbbed. The world narrowed and slowed. He could see the tea dripping from the tablecloth, falling into uneven puddles on the floor. Petunia's face, long and thin, flushed as she argued back, her mouth opening and closing. A powerful energy hummed in the air, a sudden, fierce pressure that filled the little house, answering something that had been waiting for release, as if it answered to his very will. 274, another year in Diagon Alley. On the morning of August 4th, in suburban Hampstead Garden, sunlight stabbed through the curtains. The air was heavy with summer humidity, but for those with nowhere to go, it was a bright, beautiful day. Bang! With a faint pop, Hermione appeared in Loren's bedroom, eyes gleaming with mischief like a squirrel that had just stolen a crust of bread. She glanced at the bed as she landed, empty, her brow knit. He's already up? Impossible. By the window, Loren turned and blinked. On the table, Hanch sat upright, watching. Beside him was an unfamiliar yellow owl, tilting its head at Hermione. Faced with one person and two owls, all staring back as if amused, Hermione flushed. I came to wake you up, she sounded more confident with every word, as if trying to convince herself. And, to ask if you have any plans for your birthday. Loren watched her. At the bright edge of youth, she still looked simply and utterly lovely. A short-sleeved t-shirt with a Dalmatian pattern, loose light brown shorts, white socks, and cartoon dog slippers, her calves pale and straight. He said. I believe you. Next term I'll ask Headmaster Dumbledore how to set up an anti-apparition spell array for my room. Hermione didn't mind. If the bedroom were warded, she could always get in with Alohomora. She glanced at the yellow owl on the sill. Someone sent a letter? Loren held up a parchment. It's a notice from school. Harry mentioned the book list a few days ago. Why haven't I got mine? Hermione interrupted, already padding over in her slippers. She snatched the parchment and skimmed it. Nothing notable. Third years can visit Hogsmeade. The permission slip needs a guardian's signature. Loren fed the owls jerky, absently scratching their wing roots. The birds didn't mind and buried their heads. Hogsmeade, Hermione paused, conflicted. Under someone's insistence, what should have been the most eagerly anticipated outing of third years had lost some of its shine for her. She flipped the parchment to the book list for next term and brightened. Standard Book of Spells, Grade 3, Intermediate Transfiguration, Unfogging the Future, Ancient Wizarding Artifacts, The Monster Book of Monsters. Her eyes lit up. Harry told me about this. Hagrid's Care of Magical Creatures book is meant to be brilliant. I want to see it now. Loren looked as if he were teasing the owls on purpose. Hermione schemed. How about we go to Diagon Alley for your birthday? My birthday we spent in Hogsmeade. Yours should be in Diagon Alley. It would be fun. Is it my birthday or yours? How are you already making plans? Loren smiled. Hermione rephrased. You arranged mine. Let me arrange yours. He remained unconcerned and continued fussing with the owls. Hermione grabbed his shoulder and shook him, her voice turning soft and pleading without quite realizing. Please, Loren. Caught off guard by her sudden charm in the bright morning light, Loren blinked, momentarily dazed. 2 days later, Monica Granger rubbed the corners of her eyes and yawned. Lately, she'd been exhausted. Summer meant more soda sippers and more dental problems, cavities, troublesome wisdom teeth, sensitivity. The Granger Dental Practice's regulars trusted Monica and her husband Wendell, so they'd been busy. She was the first up in the Granger house to make breakfast and see to morning chores. She padded to the bathroom to find her daughter in front of the mirror, wetting and combing the thick, unruly, golden-brown curls that framed her face. Hermione's hair was loud with health and curiosity, her small face half hidden by it. Monica stifled a sentimental smile. In the blink of an eye, her girl had grown into the bloom of youth. Who's so vain she wakes up early just to do her hair? She teased. Hermione pulled at her hair. Stop it, Mum. Come help me. Monica sighed and moved in. Don't pull so hard. I'll show you a trick. Don't slick everything to your scalp. Leave a few strands loose. And a little hairspray. Do you want lipstick? I'll open a new one. When Loren opened the front door and saw Hermione like that, he was struck. She'd changed into a pure white dress with irregular ruffles along the hem, a few curls falling across her forehead. It gave her a fresh, youthful look. She'd worn lipstick, too, delicate and bright. She smiled. The sound was a clear, bell-like laugh that went straight to Loren's chest. Mom helped, she said. How do I look? Good? Before Loren could answer, Grandpa Bates interjected from the side, laughing. Say she looks good. Why are you still staring? He clapped Loren on the back. Hermione, keep an eye on this one for me today. And with that, he nudged Loren out the door and closed it smartly. Hermione covered her mouth as she giggled. They didn't stop at the leaky cauldron. They apparated straight to Diagon Alley. As Britain's largest wizarding shopping street, Diagon Alley was usually packed at the end of August, but it was only early August now, and the crowds were manageable. Wizards, goblins, and the occasional vila passed by, but the pavement was clear enough for 2 students to walk comfortably. The sky was blue with scattered clouds and the sun warm, but not harsh. Loren still had the galleons from selling unicorn hair, so there was no need to visit Gringotts. Their first stop was Madame Malkin's for new robes. Both their school uniforms had shrunk in the last year. Sleeves and hems were suddenly too short. "Hogwarts, are you? Early birds this year." Madame Malkin greeted them, unchanged, short, plump, and wrapped in purple. She had them stand on footstools at the back of the shop, while she and an assistant draped robes over them, pinning hems to the proper length. Looking into the mirror, both of them were transported back 2 years to the day they'd first had their robes fitted by Professor McGonagall, small, naive children who had seemed not to stop growing. Hermione blinked. "Am I taller than you now?" "Am I?" Loren protested. "No, it's the footstool in your heels." He craned his neck stubbornly. Girls tended to develop sooner. Hermione was indeed a little taller, but he refused to admit it. Madame Malkin smiled. "You'll look charming in these, and by the way, your footstools are the same height." Loren was restless in front of the mirror and quickly pulled Hermione away, steering her into flourish and blots. What hit Hermione inside the shop was not the neat piles of gilded textbooks she expected, but an iron cage writhing with hundreds of thin, green-covered books whose spines were thick with fur. They snarled and fought, pages tearing as they tangled themselves up and ripped at each other. If it were not for the gold-lettered title on the cover, The Monster Book of Monsters, she might have assumed the place had been overrun by beasts. The manager moved briskly toward them. "Hogwarts? Looking for textbooks?" "Yes," Hermione said. A loud, gruff voice from the manager cut in as he put on thick gloves and picked up a large walking stick. "Clear out," he barked, approaching the cage like a man stepping into mortal danger. His face had 7 parts bravado, 2 parts fear of injury, and 1 part helplessness. Loren couldn't bear it. "Didn't you ask the publisher for a way to handle them? You just stroke their spines. They calm down." The manager froze. Really? Before an answer came, a book was grabbed and torn in half by 2 of the monster books. Chaos flared. Books paired up and started imitating the attack. "Stop! Stop!" the manager shouted, grabbed a book at the edge of the cage even as it bit him, and with gloved fingers stroked its spine. The creature relaxed instantly and lay quietly in his palm. "It works! It really works!" he cried, tears already streaming down his face. He called staff, and together they calmed the cage full of monster books into several quiet piles. After binding his hand with a healing charm, the manager pressed Loren's hand and wouldn't let go, eyes wet. "Thank you. If you hadn't told me, I can't imagine the losses. We might have lost more than the 200 invisible books of invisibility that disappeared after customers bought them." On behalf of Flourish and Blots, he insisted they accept 2 sets of textbooks for free and promised an 80% discount on all future purchases. Loren pretended to be put out. "Helped him with such a big problem, and it's not a lifetime supply," he grumbled as they left. Inside, he was secretly pleased. Hermione slid Unfogging the Future into the pendant she wore and smiled at him. "Loren, how many secrets do you have that I don't know?" He shook his head smugly. "You said they were secrets. I couldn't tell you." She hummed twice, took his hand, and they went on. They stocked potion ingredients at the apothecary. Loren added a few common herbs he thought he might use. The rarer items were simply too expensive. At Scribulus, they bought ink, quills, and loads of parchment. Hermione used scandalous amounts for history of magic essays and needed more for a potions assignment on shrinking solution. Loren was intrigued by a bottle of color-changing ink and bought 2. While waiting at the counter in the stationery shop, Loren glanced at past issues of the Daily Prophet on display. The front page had 2 photos side by side. On the left, a wild-eyed woman with willful hair. On the right, a short, plump, bald man he knew. Loren picked up the paper and read. Within half a minute, he knew enough. A deputy minister from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement had defected, taking with her the Death Eater Bellatrix Lestrange. The ministry had used the opportunity to report that Peter Pettigrew had escaped as well. A senior ministry official and 2 Death Eaters were now listed as Level 1 fugitives. 275. Meeting Harry at the soda fountain. "The Ministry of Magic really is like a sieve," Loren muttered, sliding the paper back onto the counter and earning a disapproving look from the shop assistant. Beside him, Hermione had just finished paying for a stack of parchment, smiling with that pleased look only top students wear, and drifted over cheerfully. What are you looking at? The latest Daily Prophet. I was checking if there's any big news in the magical world while we're traveling. Is there? Hermione asked. Yes, but I'm not telling you yet. Hermione huffed twice. Fine, if you won't tell me, I'll subscribe and read it myself. Where are we going next? Loren asked. To Florian Fortescue's, she said. We're tired from walking. Let's rest for a bit. From the street, the shop looked no different from a Muggle ice cream parlor. Simple, bright decor in coffee tones, the shop name stamped in gold. The weather was fine, so the outdoor tables were busy. A board by the door listed the day's specials: Vampire Special, Virgin Maiden's Blood flavored drink, Goblin Special, Golden Scented Iced Dew, and of course, plenty of ordinary flavors too. Hermione ordered an extra-large avalanche strawberry, then the three of them found a quiet spot by the window. To their surprise, they saw Harry in the corner, grinning like an idiot. Happy birthday, Loren! Did you get the collapsible cauldron I sent you? He shouted, waving his dessert spoon. Loren remembered the story of Harry running away and said absently, Thanks, I think I'd already left home when Hathaway came by. It should be waiting for me there. Harry took 2 big bites of Florian's ice cream and then looked surprised. Oh, it's only early August. What are you doing here? Hermione sat down with her extra-large avalanche and handed Loren a spoon. I'm here with Loren for his birthday. But why are you here, Harry? Harry's eyes widened when he saw Hermione. You're Hermione. She looked like Hermione, but tidier. Her hair was swept into a neat bun, a few strands artfully loose across her forehead, the sunlight through the glass making her look as if she were glowing. Hermione laughed at Harry's astonishment, eyes bright. Loren cleared his throat. Shall we get back to why you're here, Harry? Hermione's smile lingered as her gaze drifted over Loren. Harry shifted awkwardly and, picking at his hair, launched into the story about the Dursleys. An annoying relative came to the house, so I accidentally blew Aunt Marge up like a balloon and hung her from the ceiling. I was panicking, ran out, then I somehow got on the night bus, ended up in Diagon Alley, and now I'm staying at the Leaky Cauldron. That sounds dreadful, Hermione said indignantly. Even though he looked a bit bedraggled, hair messy, clothes wrinkled though cleaned by charm, his eyes were clear and his smile relaxed, and she suspected he'd be all right. Loren scooped a large spoonful of ice cream and smirked. The International Statute of Secrecy, the restriction on underage magic. By my count, you've probably broken 70 laws. Harry gave a helpless look. Thanks, Loren. That really makes me feel better about myself. He spread his hands. At first I was terrified, but then I met Cornelius Fudge. He said the ministry wouldn't send someone to Azkaban just for blowing up an aunt. He arranged for me to stay at the Leaky Cauldron and had Tom look after me. Honestly, it's not bad. I can get up whenever I want, eat whatever I like, and do magic freely. As long as I stay in Diagon Alley, I can go where I like. The Leaky Cauldron's full of interesting people, the shopkeepers are friendly, Florian even helps me with my essays and gives me free ice cream every half hour. Dumbledore makes me spend time with the Dursleys every summer. I think I've done my time. I can stay here until school starts. Harry leaned back with a satisfied sigh. I love this place. Hermione looked at his rumpled clothing and then at his face. Something about him seemed off, but she couldn't name it. Loren felt it more clearly. He'd had that feeling before. Living at the children's home was bearable until he met Mr. Bates and finally understood what real stability felt like. After a moment, Loren asked softly, Harry, do you really think it's good here? The plainness of the question took the smile off Harry's face. He tried to force it back on, but it faltered, panic and unease showing through. He knew, of course, it wasn't really good. Sleeping as late as he liked meant no one woke him. Eating under an umbrella was pleasant, but he missed having someone sit with him at a proper table, asking about the weather while cutting steak, rather than counting alone how many strands of meat were left or how many sprigs of thyme were on the plate. The kindness of the shopkeepers only reminded him that he didn't belong anywhere. His head dropped toward the ice cream, and his voice came out small, almost like a whine. I've nowhere to go. I can't go back to the Dursleys. Sirius isn't around. I just don't have anywhere. Bang! Hermione slapped the table, eyes fierce. Harry, you do have somewhere to go. Ron would welcome you at the Burrow, and Loren and I would welcome you at ours. And Hagrid, he must be worrying about care of magical creatures right now, and would love your help, Loren added. Honestly, it's far better than you staying here. Harry managed a shaky, forced smile. But Fudge won't let me leave Diagon Alley, he said. Loren looked away with distaste, plucked up another spoonful, and said flatly, That's because Bellatrix Lestrange escaped from Azkaban. Bellatrix Lestrange, the Death Eater who tortured Neville's parents. She's escaped? Hermione exclaimed, patting Loren's shoulder. Is that the big news you were keeping from me? I knew it would happen, so I was going to tell you later, Loren said, feigning injury, which made Hermione fondly rub his shoulder again. Harry looked worried. I also saw that the Ministry's prison department said Wormtail escaped too. Why are they keeping tabs on me now if Bellatrix got away? Because you are Harry Potter, Hermione said seriously. Bellatrix was one of Voldemort's most fanatical followers, and she's insane. After Voldemort fell, the Death Eaters scattered, but she didn't flee then. She attacked the Longbottoms. Everyone knows the name Harry Potter now, the boy who lived. If Bellatrix finds you, she'll do terrible things. No, it won't be like that, Harry swallowed. I don't think so. Loren shrugged and gave his analysis. Bellatrix is impulsive. If she were still in Britain, Harry, you'd already be in St. Mungo's. The fact you can still shop and eat ice cream means she's likely left the country. It's possible she's rejoined Voldemort elsewhere. Harry exhaled with visible relief. That makes sense. Hermione nodded, then frowned. If that's true, why would the Ministry be monitoring you? They can't take that risk, Loren explained. If a high-ranking Ministry official had helped free a notorious Death Eater, the fallout would ruin the Ministry's reputation. They even announced Wormtail's escape along with Bellatrix's to control the narrative. If someone famous like Harry Potter were hurt right now, public outrage could force Fudge out. So it's about public image, Harry said bitterly. I almost believed Fudge had turned into a decent man. A large, fluffy gray owl suddenly barreled toward Florian's, thudded against the window, and fell onto the sill. Errol, Harry cried, scrambling out to scoop up the exhausted post owl. Hermione rushed to the counter to fetch water and some fruit. Errol was barely conscious, opening one blurry eye to hoot gratefully, pecking at the water, then collapsing on the table to rest. The three of them sat with the tired bird until it recovered. Loren kept glancing at a big parcel tied to the owl's leg and worried quietly that the poor creature might collapse. The package looked important. It must be Ron's present for you, Harry said. Loren took it, tore the parchment open, and found a gold-wrapped gift and a card. Dear Loren, happy birthday. You and Hermione actually went to Egypt too. Bill told us about it. So unfair. I couldn't think what to get you, so I sent an Egyptian wizard's potion-stirring rod. It looks like a pharaoh's scepter and apparently changes color to show how hot the cauldron is, but Fred and George poked at it for days and couldn't make it work. Hope you can figure it out. I can't believe Harry actually blew up his aunt, and the Ministry did nothing. Dad said they discussed it among officials. Dad also told me Harry is living alone at the Leaky Cauldron. Errol's too old, so I wanted to ask if you could use Hanch to send Harry a note, asking if he'd like to come stay at the Burrow until school starts. Dad'll sort things with the Ministry, which is why we came back early from Egypt. Ron P.S. Could I borrow your shrinking potion essay to copy from? Cheers. Loren grinned and told Harry about Ron's invitation. Really? Harry jumped to his feet. I'll pack now. He dashed out, came back half a minute later carrying the old owl, voice bright and relieved. There's a fireplace at the Leaky Cauldron. I'm taking Errol straight to the Burrow. Loren and Hermione exchanged smiles as he ran off. Mount Greylock, Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Ilvermorny isn't as old as Hogwarts. It was founded a little over 300 years ago. The stone cottage built by Iseult Sayre and her muggle husband James Stewart still stands on a clearing at the mountain's summit. Out of respect for the founders, few students come here. Even professors and the headmaster visit only for centennial events. Before term begins, the place is almost deserted. Yet today, there were voices in that long, empty stone cottage. Through the cracks in the walls, a tall, dark-skinned woman knelt on the floor. Her hair was wild. Azkaban had hollowed her cheeks and left her gaunt, Bellatrix Lestrange looked skeletal. Still, a fervent, fanatical light shone in her eyes. "I knew it," she whispered, feverish. "I knew it. The great Dark Lord has conquered death. He will never be defeated." Before her, a pitch-black shadow pooled where the sunlight could not reach. In its depths gleamed a pair of red, slit eyes like a snake's, and a voice cold and terrible spoke. "Bellatrix, my loyal servant, I know you remained true at your trial. You sought me out, as you promised, and I will return to save you. You will be rewarded." Bellatrix bowed lower, rapturous. "Master, I need no reward. I only wish for your true return, that the world may once more know the fear of our rule." The eyes in the shadow glowed with a hard, pitiless light. "Of course, but we must plan carefully first." "Master, please don't send me to Hogwarts." From another corner of the room, a short, stout man knelt, trembling. "Wormtail," the voice from the darkness softened. "Believe me, Peter, you will be rewarded as well." After Harry left, Loren and Hermione paid for their ice cream and continued strolling down Diagon Alley. As they passed a magical creature shop, a large ginger animal suddenly darted out of the store, a long-haired cat, its small paws clinging to Loren's trousers, round eyes looking up at him pitifully. Hermione's face lit up. "What a beautiful cat!" "You have a thing for cats," Loren thought to himself. The ginger cat's fur was thick, fluffy, and soft to the touch, but its expression was rather miserable, the corners of its mouth turned down in a gloomy little frown, oddly like a sad persimmon cake. Loren bent and scooped the cat into his arms, scratching its chin. "Are you coming to join me?" "Meow-ow." The cat tried to make a delicate mew, but its voice cracked into a hoarse rasp, like a smoker's cough in a kitten. "Crookshanks." Hermione giggled. The cat had become even more endearing to her. She smoothed its long fur along its back. Loren smiled too. He seemed to recognize the animal. Crookshanks, listening to their laughter, thought cat life was hard. If it hadn't sensed a familiar aura about Loren, it wouldn't have bolted from its cage or tried to act like a little drama queen to win sympathy. Now embarrassed, the ginger cat buried its head in Loren's arm and kept its eyes down. "Crookshanks!" A witch in thick dark glasses hurried out of the shop. Seeing the cat in their arms, she let out a relieved sigh. "Thank goodness. I was worried you'd vanish into the racks and hide again. Thank you for catching this little troublemaker." She took the cat from Loren. "He's been too naughty. Nobody's wanted him, even after he's been in the shop so long." She turned to go back inside, but Crookshanks wouldn't stay. The cat mewed piteously at Loren and Hermione, utterly dejected. Hermione's heart melted, and she tugged Loren along to follow. The shop was small, cages packed along the walls. The air smelled faintly foul, and the place was noisy with squeaks, chirps, and hisses. Two enormous purple toads sat in their cages, greedily devouring dead flies, drool trickling from their mouths. A terrifyingly large turtle by the window had a jewel-like shell. Poisonous orange snails crawled slowly on a glass tank. A plump white rabbit popped into a silk top hat with a soft pop and then popped back again, repeatedly transforming. There were cats of every color, a cage of noisy ravens, and a basket of custard-colored fur balls buzzing about. On the counter, sleek black rats were playing a jumping game, balanced on their bare, long tails. Most of the creatures here had weak magical abilities, more pet shop than reserve. Hermione haggled with the witch from earlier. Because Crookshanks was so naughty, the shop assistant was keen to move him on and seemed to have no bottom line on the price. Loren looked around and asked, bright-eyed, "No demagogues, akami, measles, or horned serpents here?" "You must be joking. Those dangerous creatures are strictly forbidden for private breeding and trade by the Ministry of Magic," the witch in dark glasses replied. She glanced around, saw only the two of them, and lowered her voice. "If you're seriously interested, I could put you in touch with some channels." "No," Hermione cut her off sharply and glared at Loren. 10 sickles, and that's it. Pay up." All right. The witch hurriedly agreed, probably realizing she'd said too much. She even tossed in an extra wicker basket. Hermione left with the basket, cat inside, dragging a sulking Loren beside her. Outside, Crookshanks escaped the basket and settled itself at Loren's feet, circling him possessively. The fluffy thing was obedient and oddly devoted. Even if it weren't so cute, it would still be charming. "It really seems to like you," Hermione said, a touch sour. It was supposed to be her pet, but Loren looked far more like the owner. Her long eyelashes fluttered as she concentrated, lips delicate, and though her lipstick had faded by the time they'd finished ice cream, a little bright red remained at the corners, making them even more tempting. He wondered what they would taste like. Loren leaned in, lowering his head. Mmm. Hermione's mind went blank. Her hands halted, her heart thudded at a speed she'd never known before. Thump, 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 thump. It felt as if it would burst out of her chest. Loren felt the soft warmth of the girl's breath and the faint scent clinging to her, hairspray and shampoo, detergent from her dress, the milky smell of youth. He couldn't place it, but it filled his nostrils. Loren, I'm home. Bates pushed open the door, carrying a bag of plant fertilizer and changing his shoes. He noticed a ginger cushion on the sofa, and Loren sitting upright beside it with a dopey smile. That was odd. Loren usually collapsed into the sofa the moment he sat down. How was your day with little Hermione? Bates asked. Oh, Wendell and Monica are too busy and tired to come over. They asked me to give you your birthday present. As he drew closer, he realized the cushion was a large cat. His years managing animals on the ranch kicked in. Bates picked up Crookshanks, parted his long fur, and opened the cat's mouth to check its teeth. He chuckled. Good little thing, just a bit underfed. Feed him up and he'll be a fine hunter. Crookshanks accepted the inspection with a bemused expression. Loren didn't move, staring at the empty air with that ridiculous smile. Dazed and confused, I wonder what's happened, Bates muttered, then took the cat to the bathroom for a wash. At the Granger house, Wendell knocked on his daughter's bedroom door. Hermione, dinner's ready. Not eating. Hermione's muffled reply sounded like she was under a blanket. Wendell scratched his head, puzzled. Did you eat with Loren today? Yes, we ate. This time her voice was clear, with a hint of indignation. Wendell stood baffled, deciding he needed to discuss puberty with Monica, who scolded him and made him more bewildered. Loren blinked awake and sat up in bed. He stretched, then paused, staring at the bedroom door in thought. Usually Hermione would apparate in to wake him by now. Then yesterday came back to him in pieces. I actually made a move. Hermione didn't seem to refuse or be angry then. He dressed, rubbed his face, and went to the bathroom. On the sofa, Crookshanks, freshly bathed, lifted his head and opened his yellow eyes at Loren's arrival. Meow? Nothing. Loren chuckled. We're going to wake your owner. Meow? That's right. Hermione's your owner. She paid for you. Lifting up Crookshanks, Loren waved his wand, and with a soft pop, they vanished. Chapter 277, Harry Potter Returned to Hogwarts, Day August 7th, Hampstead Garden, the Grangers' home. When Loren appeared in Hermione's room, she was still asleep. She lay neatly as always on the soft mattress, tucked under a thin summer quilt patterned with blue stars, wearing those little bear pajamas. There were slight bags under her eyes and faint dark circles. She had probably gone to bed very late. Loren had planned to wake her and tease her about all the times she'd barged into his room over the holidays, but the moment he saw her face, those plans fell away. Crookshanks had squeezed into the narrow gap between the wardrobe and the wall, curled up with his front paws tucked under him, fluffy and solemn, and watching his two new owners with an expression almost soft and pleading. The morning light had begun to filter through the window. Hermione's lashes fluttered as the light roused her internal clock. She was stirring out of a deep sleep. Loren lingered a moment, then sat beside her, covering her eyes with one hand to shield her from the brightness. With the other, he lifted his wand and murmured quietly, Patronus. He remembered last night's memory and restrained the spell. Only a faint silver glow leaked from the wand tip rather than a full Patronus. Under his palm, he felt Hermione's breathing slow. The fluttering of her lashes eased and then stopped, and she sank back into peaceful sleep. The gentle, joyful shimmer of the Patronus did exactly what he'd hoped, calmed the room. They stayed like that for who knew how long, until Monica knocked once on the door to say she and Wendell had to be off to work and reminding Hermione to eat breakfast. When Hermione finally woke, it felt like she'd had an impossibly comfortable sleep and a very long dream, one in which she and Loren kept kissing, sometimes he, sometimes she, until the dream blurred and his lips burned across her face in a maddening, chaotic loop. She opened her eyes shyly. Loren's hand still rested warm against the skin around her eyes, and through the gaps between his fingers, she could see the pale morning light. She smelled of him, his scent, and that reassuring whiff of orange toothpaste. The warmth over her eyes was so pleasant, she wanted to drift back to sleep. Loren felt the tickle of her lashes against his palm and kept his hand there until she was truly awake. Then he removed it. Hermione blinked at the sudden brightness. She squinted and made a soft, almost purring sound like a kitten. Loren leaned down and met her brown eyes. Her face went crimson as she remembered last night and the dream. She burrowed further under the quilt until only a shy pair of eyes peered out. "What are you doing here?" "To wake you up," he said with a smile. "You didn't have to." Hermione's muffled protest came from under the duvet, distorted into a charming little buzz. "And I'm not." Her words froze as she remembered yesterday. "About yesterday?" Loren asked, feigning innocence. Hermione's eyes widened, and she shot him a warning glare. "You're not allowed to talk about that. Don't you dare mention it." Loren blinked like an innocent child. "I was talking about Crookshanks. I wanted to decide whether he'll live with me or with you." Crookshanks chose that moment to yowl helpfully from his hiding place. "Meow! You!" Hermione was flustered and annoyed at once. "Get out! I'll talk to you after I change." Loren obeyed with a mock sullen bow, rested Crookshanks padding after him. The morning air outside was cool and sweet with dew. From the second-floor balcony, you could see both the Granger garden and Loren's next door, and the rows of greenery along Hampstead Gardens streets. Late summer was leaning toward autumn. Plane trees had lost the sharpest green at their edges, and the longer blooming flowers still clung on. Fireweed hung its purple-red blooms in cheerful clusters against the lawn. Loren watched hydrangeas blooming along the street, blue and white clusters spilling from the bushes, and smiled. There was still time. "Crookshanks stays with me, of course," Hermione called from the room. "I bought him." Loren looked at the flowers and returned her smile. "We'll see." September 1st, returned to Hogwarts Day. The night before, Loren had packed lightly. Clothes, textbooks, snacks, all tucked into his pendant. The outwardly empty suitcase was just for show. While he slept, Bates had filled the suitcase with winter clothes, sweets, and a tin of cat food. After breakfast, Bates walked Loren across to the Grangers' doorstep. Hermione was already waiting, packed and ready, carrying a small wheeled case and a wicker basket for Crookshanks. Though the cat was still in Wendell's arms, drowsy after apparition, and being treated with the gentleness of someone holding a child. "You're here," Hermione cried, checking her watch. It wasn't even 9. The Hogwarts Express left at 11, and after apparating to King's Cross, they'd have time to spare. They all went back inside for a proper last-minute goodbye. "Wendell, want to go fishing this weekend?" Bates asked from the sofa, full of temptation. "A friend said the current's great right now. Lots of fish." Wendell's eyes lit up. "Yes, absolutely. The clinic's quieter this time of year. I could do with a break." They debated plans, and Bates and Monica discussed an itinerary, while Loren and Hermione exchanged bemused glances. It wasn't the emotional send-off they'd imagined. Wendell set Crookshanks on the sofa and inspected his teeth, squeezing his paws to check the nails. Crookshanks indulged him with lazy tolerance, only swatting at him when he grew awkward. Close to 11, final packing finished, Loren and Hermione grabbed their cases. Crookshanks suddenly sprang awake, dashed from Wendell's arms, and clung to Loren's shoe. Bates stood and looked at them both, eyes strangely misty. "Will you be back for Christmas?" Loren scooped up Crookshanks and, wand in hand, said, "Yes, definitely this time. You promised that last year and the year before." Bates laughed and ruffled Loren's hair. Loren grinned. Then, with a whoosh, they were off. On the train, barely had they stowed their luggage when Harry and Ron pounced on them at the compartment door. Harry looked preoccupied but clean and neat, the work of Mrs. Weasley, and his hair was better tamed than when Loren had last seen him. Ron, after their long summer apart, seemed to have acquired a few extra freckles. "Loren, Hermione, you won't believe it. We came to the station in a ministry car this morning," Ron bubbled. "Dad said it was an old dark green model. The drivers were ministry employees, all in these mysterious green suits. Shame you didn't see them. They looked brilliant." Hermione put Crookshanks back into the basket. He still seemed drowsy. Loren noticed Harry's distracted look. "What is it?" A whistle sounded, and the train began to roll. The sudden shift made them aware they were moving. Harry made a quick decision and leaned toward his friends. Let's find somewhere to talk in private. Loren, Hermione, Harry, and Ron threaded down the corridor, looking for an empty compartment. They hadn't gone far when Percy's Grand Prefect strut came toward them, badge gleaming on his chest. He held himself as if begging to be noticed. Loren, Hermione, good morning, he said, all stiff politeness. I believe I saw an empty carriage near the back when I was assigning duties. As head boy, if you have any problems, you can always come to me. He glanced pointedly at Harry and Ron. You too. Loren couldn't resist. Mr. Percy, why does your badge say Big Head? The crowd of friends burst out laughing. HB could stand for head boy, but it looked even funnier as humongous big head. Percy's face went beet red. George, Fred, he snarled, and stormed off in the direction of the twins. At the back of the train, they found the compartment Percy had described, but it was already occupied by a man asleep on the bench. He wore a patched, worn wizard's robe and looked exhausted and thin, a beard bristling around his mouth, his light brown hair showing streaks of gray. They closed the sliding door and sat quietly across from him. Loren switched on his magical sight and observed the man more carefully. His magic was far from weak, but there was a different tint to it now, agitated, strained. He looked malnourished, mentally worn, magic scarcely active. There was a stubbornness to his bearing that spoke of someone who paid dearly for his principles. The sight of him stirred an odd, familiar ache in Loren, as if he were looking at an old photograph of Bates when he was younger. Loren ran the dates through his head. September 1st, 1993. It was a full moon tonight. No wonder the man seemed so depleted. The others whispered guesses. Who do you think he is? Ron asked. Hermione pointed to a shabby suitcase tied to the luggage rack with neat knots. A corner of the label showed a peeling name, Professor Remus John Lupin. I think he's the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, she said. Of course. Who else? Ron said suspiciously. Past teachers in that post had given them reason to be wary. Harry said nothing at first, though he leaned forward as if to peek more closely. Loren changed the subject. Harry, what did you want to speak to us about? Harry gave them a strange look, then told them, The Ministry. Scrimgeour sent 2 cars to take us to the station this morning to make sure Arthur got me safely onto the train. Why didn't you tell me? Ron blurted. Harry cleared his throat. I overheard your mum and dad talking last night, Ron accused, and then Hermione cut through the arguing with a practical calm. Harry, don't worry too much. Loren and I both think Bellatrix Lestrange has already fled the country. I think so too, Harry said, shrugging. I even used Hermione's reasoning to convince Sirius to sign my Hogsmeade permission slip. Hogsmeade. Ron's face went dreamy. This year we can finally go to Honeydukes together. Pepper Imps, Sugar Quills. Harry listened, rapt, and Loren shared a quick grin with Hermione, meeting the faintly reproachful look she gave him and returning it with a smile. Professor Lupin slept soundly as the others chatted. While they talked, the train had already left London and was speeding through fields dotted with cattle and sheep, pastures and hedgerows blurred past the windows. By noon, dark clouds had begun to gather, stretching across the sky and dimming the day. Looks like it's going to rain, Hermione said, straightening and peering out the window. Professor Lupin was dozing with his head against the glass. The window was ajar and a cold draft slipped in. Hermione frowned, then leaned over and whispered, Should we close the window for Professor Lupin? He might catch a cold. I'll do it. Loren stood and gently eased the window shut without waking Lupin. Just then, the compartment door opened, and a plump witch with dimples and a cheerful smile pushed her head in. Dearies, anything from the trolley? The 4 of them exchanged looks and smiled. I'll buy, Ron said at once. I've got some prize money left from Egypt, and Mum gave me pocket money. He jumped up and went into the aisle. Bertie bought every flavor beans, chewing gum, chocolate frogs, pumpkin pasties, cauldron cakes. Ron bought an outrageous pile of sweets and snacks and dumped them onto the compartment table. 12 sickles, cheaper than I thought, he grinned. He remembered, faintly and awkwardly, how in first year Harry had bought almost as many treats in the same compartment. He felt a different sort of warmth now, but he didn't dwell on it. He just wanted to enjoy the food before the twins could pinch any of it. "And this is my treat, too." He produced a bulging paper box and opened it to reveal 4 sandwiches. Bacon ones. Mum finally remembered I don't like corned beef. Mrs. Weasley made some for me as well. Harry took out an identical box and opened it to show the same bacon sandwiches. Ron picked one up, bit into it, and muttered, "A bit dry, a bit cold, needs heating." Loren produced a glass jar of honey, flicked his wand, and set 2 small blue flames dancing above it. "Stick them on top to toast for a bit," he said. "Praise Loren." Ron cheered and stacked the sandwich boxes on the jar. The smell of bacon slowly began to waft up as the sandwiches warmed. Mrs. Weasley's cooking was excellent. The sandwiches smelled tempting even after hours on the train. Meow! Crookshanks emerged from his wicker basket, back paws on the seat and front paws on the little table, bright yellow eyes fixed on the jar. Ron stared at the squashed face and said, "What an ugly cat." "Crookshanks, don't run around." Hermione scooped the cat up and scolded Ron. She glared at him. "Nonsense, Crookshanks is beautiful." Harry watched Crookshanks silently. At the right moment, Loren passed round chocolate frogs to each of them with a smile. "Eat, eat." Outside, the clouds thickened. Around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, the long brewing rain finally began. The train clattered and rattled as raindrops pattered against the windows and the wind howled, but Professor Lupin slept on. Listening to the rain against the glass, Loren and the others felt their minds settle. Hermione stroked Crookshanks's ginger fur until the cat's eyelids drooped. It soon dozed in Loren's arms. Catching Hermione's slightly peeved expression, Loren grinned. "Hermione? Want some cockroach clusters?" He pinched off a piece of candy and offered it to her. "No, I don't." Hermione pushed it away, scrunching her face. As the sky darkened into early evening and the rain thickened, the train lights came on with a click. The wheels gradually slowed, and the carriage began to roll to a stop. "Fantastic!" Ron shook his head to clear his doze, a twitchy motion that would have made Crookshanks proud. He stood up, carefully stepped past the sleeping Professor Lupin, and peered out the window. "Let's get off quickly. I can't wait for the feast." Hermione checked her watch, brows knitted. "We still have an hour until we arrive." "Then why are we stopping?" Harry asked. Loren stood and craned down the aisle. Heads of curious young witches and wizards were poking out of compartments all along the carriage. The train juddered to a halt, and a few trunks and trunks of luggage clattered from the racks. Then, without warning, all the lights went out, and the carriage plunged into darkness. "What's going on?" someone muttered. "My foot! Who stepped on my foot?" another voice yelled. In a compartment nearer the middle of the Hogwarts Express, the one closest to the door, Neville Longbottom shifted further inside his seat. Hannah Abbott, sitting beside him, immediately shuffled closer too. Hannah, rosy-cheeked and with 2 golden braids, was happily sharing chocolate frog cards. "Look, another Dumbledore," she muttered. "They really ought to print fewer Dumbledore cards. It would make the headmaster seem more mysterious." "Yes, yes," Neville said, stumbling over his words as he always did around Hannah. He had tried not to stammer over the summer, but Hannah's easy enthusiasm made him nervy. She swung her legs and said lightly, "Tell me about your parents." Over the holidays, guests at the Leaky Cauldron were all talking about the Longbottoms. Then the train stopped and the lights went dead. Hannah lost her balance and fell forward. Neville reached out and steadied her, panting. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Hannah's heart pounded. She found Neville strangely steady, different from the nervous boy she usually knew. "Neville, Shh!" Neville put a hand to his lips and hushed her. Through the compartment chatter, they heard the train door open. In the thin, dim light beyond the carriage, they thought they saw something climb aboard. A chill followed, not the cool of autumn rain, but a deeper cold that seemed to hollow the chest. "Stay still," Neville whispered. He pushed the compartment door open a sliver and peered out. Hannah watched him go, then saw the door close again with a soft popping noise. A flicker of light, a small flame on a wand, illuminated the doorway and the figure that had entered. It was tall and cloaked, the hood brushing the ceiling. From beneath the ragged cloak protruded hands that were not fully flesh, grayish, withered skin clinging to bones, glistening as if coated in mucus. The sight of it left Neville breathless, Memories and images he never wanted to recall surged through his mind. Screams, Bellatrix Lestrange, the agonized cries of victims of the Cruciatus. His knees went weak. Neville! Neville! Hannah's voice was frantic from inside the compartment. She saw him go pale and reach for the door handle, but Neville gripped it and held himself steady. The thing by the door seemed to be sampling the carriage, breathing in the warmth of so many young, happy people. It moved slowly, savoring the positive emotions like a predator. Ever since the news of Lestrange's escape, Neville's family had hung on every scrap of ministry news. His father had been watching for any chance of reinstatement or revenge. Growing up in a family of Aurors had taught Neville what a Dementor looked and felt like. He knew why it had come, drawn to a carriage full of delicious food and joyful company, and he knew how dangerous it could be. These creatures were mindless, hard to reason with, and could lose themselves if tempted by too much warmth and happiness. Listen, Hannah, I'm going to get help. Try not to alarm it. I'll be back very soon. Neville's voice was low but firm. Hannah nodded. Neville strode toward the back of the train. Compared with the prefect or the head boy, he felt, without knowing why, that someone else might be more reliable. As he moved away, a dark shape drifted past the compartment, the Dementor following him. Hannah's eyes widened. She tried to scream, but felt an invisible hand clamp at her throat. The cold pressed in until she could hardly breathe. When the Dementor left their compartment, she whimpered, wiped her eyes, and forced herself out of her seat. She ran toward the prefect compartment at the front of the carriage. The door there burst open, and a plump, flustered figure squeezed in. Loren, a Dementor boarded, he began. He broke off as he saw Harry's eyes roll back and the boy slump to the floor. Harry! Ron lunged over. Seeing the chaos, realization slammed into Neville like a physical blow. He had led the Dementor into the carriage. Loren and Hermione immediately drew their wands and pointed them at the figure. A foul sound came from beneath the tattered cloak as an icy chill rolled through the compartment. Shadows writhed under the cloak, and a black, oily mist seeped out, saturated with despair. In an instant, the presence of the Dementor dragged painful memories up in those who looked at it. Joy seeping away, positive emotions being sucked into the chill, leaving behind numbness and dread. Hermione shivered. Crookshanks trembled in Loren's arms. Loren stepped forward and gave the Dementor a small, confident smile. He laid a steady hand on Hermione's shoulder and leaned close enough for only her to hear. Meeting me, you're in for a world of trouble. Neville felt the tension that had strangled him ease. For a moment, it was as if the fear belonged to the Dementor, not to them. Loren raised his wand, his voice clear and commanding. Expecto Patronum. A soft silver light burst into the carriage, filling their vision like a flame. It swept outward, bright but not blinding, dissolving the pervasive cold. The Dementor in front of them froze as if struck by a primal terror. Then it turned and fell back, but the silver light wrapped around it and poured out into the night. Black smoke fractured and muffled. Eerie screams issued from beneath the cloak as the light surged toward the front of the train. The Patronus streamed out, a brilliant silver-white tide that chased the Dementor away. The wind outside the carriage howled and mingled with the creature's distant cries. Neville watched, astonished. The silver radiance he saw was astonishingly powerful, and yet he realized it was only a fraction of Loren's strength. Behind them, Professor Remus Lupin sat up and watched the scene, dumbfounded. Hogwarts students at that level? He felt a flicker of worry and something like pride. What, then, was he supposed to teach? The Patronus charm, one of the most powerful and most ancient defensive spells in the wizarding world, and also the most famous. Casting a fully formed Patronus successfully was extraordinarily difficult. Silver radiance poured from the tip of Loren's wand, spreading from him like an invisible flame toward both ends of the train, a magnificent tide of light. As it drove the Dementors away, the Hogwarts Express was washed in a layer of silver white. Remus Lupin, who had seen only a few fully formed Patronuses in his time, James's stag, Lily's doe, even a ferret and a tabby, had never seen anything like this. Compared to Dumbledore's phoenix, this enormous Patronus delivered a different kind of shock. When the threat was finally dispelled, Loren lowered his wand and stopped. The silver light, its source gone, faded over a few breaths and winked out. As he put his wand away, he felt something hard and small at its tip. A Dementor stone? Loren slid it calmly into his pocket. Neville and Lupin wore the same stunned expressions. Though the immediate panic was over, they all needed a moment to absorb what had happened. Lupin stared at Loren with a mixture of confusion and admiration and muttered, "A third year?" Hermione pursed her lips and smirked. Seeing Lupin and Neville so lost, Ron huffed. Loren, outrageous as he often was still normal. Ron shifted his grip to cradle Harry's head, making sure he wouldn't hurt himself while disoriented. "Professor," Loren said, his voice a little firmer, "what should we do now?" Lupin remembered his role and, with a small start, pushed away his chaotic thoughts. He looked at Harry, limp in Ron's arms, the lightning-shaped scar, James and Lily's son, the boy who lived. Sirius's description, calm, brave, exceptionally powerful, Dumbledore's successor, fated enemy of you-know-who, ran through his head. After the spectacle of the Patronus, Lupin thought Sirius might have been inflating things a little. He regained control quickly. "You all stay here," he told the students in the compartment. "I'll go to the front to find the driver and the head boy and girl, and I'll send word to Professor McGonagall. Maybe we can get the train into the station sooner." "What about Harry?" Ron snapped. "Wake him up. Give him chocolate." Lupin stepped into the aisle and looked at Loren. "You know what to do, right?" "Yes, Professor," Loren nodded. Watching Lupin walk away, Ron relaxed a little. He dragged Harry up onto the seat and, turning to Loren, asked, "How do we wake him?" Neville sat beside Harry, pried his eyelids open, and checked his pupils. Dementors drain happiness and dredge up memories of the worst things. They hit people who are already vulnerable the hardest. Hermione leaned over to look too. They were still some distance away when this happened. She said finally, "Think of it as a nightmare. He's just been knocked out by one." "If you say so, I know how to wake him." Ron didn't bother with finesse. He slapped Harry across the cheek. Everyone watching, Neville, Loren, Hermione, fell silent, a little taken aback by the bluntness of it. "Harry! Harry! Wake up!" "Woo! What?" Harry blinked and pushed his fallen glasses up. He felt a little sting on his cheek and looked at the others, dazed and foolish. "I'm fine," he said after a moment, then glanced toward the door. "What happened? Where did that thing go? Who was screaming?" "No one was screaming," Ron said suspiciously, eyeing Harry for a moment. Harry felt the look was rude, but there wasn't time to be offended. "But I clearly heard screaming," Harry insisted. Loren, rummaging through the pile of snacks on the little table, remembered the chocolate frogs and pulled a few from the pile. "It was screaming in your memory," he said. "Dementors bring up bad memories. It did the same to me." Neville, thinking of his own encounter, nodded. If it hadn't been for Hannah, he might have blacked out like Harry. He looked gratefully at Loren, but didn't say anything aloud. Instead, he stood, clapped his hands, and said, "Wait here for news from the professor. I need to go to the front carriage. Hannah's waiting for me." Harry watched Neville go and felt more confused than before. He turned to his friends. "So that cloaked ghost was a Dementor?" "Yes," Loren said, handing out the chocolate frogs. "Chocolate eases the effects of a Dementor. Have some." Ron unwrapped a frog and took a bite. "The Dementor followed Neville in here," he said. "You went stiff, fell off the seat, and started twitching. Then Loren came out and drove it off with a Patronus." Harry had no problem with Loren knowing the Patronus charm. He bit into the chocolate and felt warmth spread through him, easing the chill. "But why was it only me who passed out?" "I don't know," Hermione said, frowning and watching the little chocolate frog twitch its legs. "We'll have to ask Professor Lupin." Loren snatched the frog from her hand and popped it into his mouth. The rest of the journey was taken up with talk, about Lestrange, about the Dementors, about how odd it was that so many were around. Lupin and Percy checked in on them at one point, reassured themselves that Harry was all right, gave instructions, and left. At Hogsmeade Station, the students poured out into the cold night. Rain stung down in sheets. Owls hooted, cats mewed, Neville's toad croaked muffledly beneath his hat, and Hagrid, the half-giant, waved his little umbrella at the far end of the platform. "First years this way," he bellowed. Loren and the others spotted Hagrid and waved. "We're fine, Hagrid," Harry shouted, but the crush of people pushed them along, and there wasn't time to go over and talk. The crowd shoved them toward the Thestral carriages. Loren and Hermione leaned on each other to keep their balance. "Let's go straight to the castle," he called to Harry. "We can talk more at the feast." They rode in the swaying, straw-strewn carriages up to the castle. Hermione, whose robes were enchanted to repel water, still had the ends of her hair damp. "Finally," she sighed, leaning her head against the window. "My head feels cleaner than when Mum washes it." Ron ran a hand through his hair, letting rainwater drip into the straw. Harry, feeling steadier after the chocolate but still weak, pushed his glasses up and glanced out and froze. Two Dementors stood on the roadside, their presence sending cold crawling up his spine. He sat back down hard. "Why are there so many Dementors around?" Hermione asked, staring out the small window until they passed out of sight. "Ask Professor Lupin," Loren said, pinching a damp curl of Hermione's hair and flicking his wand. Whirlwind sweep. A quick gust swirled the moisture from her hair and blew it out of the carriage. Loren rolled the section of hair between his fingers and smirked. Not bad, still not like shampoo, though. They climbed the stone steps and entered the dim, vast entrance hall. The enchanted torches flared to life, drying robes and keeping the cold at bay. To the right, the doors to the great hall were open. The ceiling above reflected a turbulent, clouded night. Professor McGonagall stood at the entrance, hair in a tight bun and eyes sharp behind square glasses. "Quiet down," she called. "Stay in the hall a little while so you don't catch your death. The feast won't start for some time. Go to your dormitories to wash and change, but be back in good time." The firelight and the order of the castle washed away much of the day's fatigue and fear. The students began to laugh and chatter again. Fred and George were nearby, muttering about their plans. "Counting those who want answers and don't pay, we'll have enough to open a shop in 10 years, Fred whispered. "Wasn't it 8 years? George whispered back. "I accidentally overspent on alchemical supplies in Egypt," Fred admitted with a grin. "Used some of the seed money." Hermione tugged Loren's sleeve. Professor McGonagall was approaching. "Morgan, Granger, Potter, come with me," she said briskly. "Don't worry, you're just coming to the office for a talk. Weasley, go get yourself changed." Fred and George called, "All right, Professor," in perfect unison. Ron's eyes widened as McGonagall led Harry, Hermione, and Loren away from the crowd. The three of them climbed the marble steps and walked down a corridor to the Transfiguration Professor's office, where a warm fire crackled. Headmaster Dumbledore sat by the hearth, adding logs, dressed in his golden-red robes for the opening feast. Madame Pomfrey sat on a guest sofa, hands folded. McGonagall's smile vanished. "Harry, go sit and let Madame Pomfrey examine you," she ordered. "Professor Lupin sent an owl. He said you weren't feeling well on the train." Pomfrey huffed. "It's outrageous. The Ministry sending Dementors near the school. Do they think Hogwarts is Azkaban?" She set to examining Harry. "It's nothing serious. Lupin handled it well. Finally, a defense against the dark arts teacher who understands the symptoms." Dumbledore paused and raised his head. "Minerva," he said cheerfully, then turned to Loren and reached up to roughly line his hand with the boy's head, judging his height. "You've grown so much, several inches over the summer, I should think. Hermione's even a bit taller than you now. She's shot up." Hermione watched the old headmaster with bright eyes. Loren felt something like warmth in his chest at the simple, genuine gesture. "Sir, did you need me for something?" he asked. Dumbledore stroked his beard, straightened his hat, and chuckled. "Leave the office to Minerva and Hermione. Come take a walk with this old man and we'll talk on the way." Loren nodded and followed him out. Madame Pomfrey finished with Harry and said approvingly, "There's nothing serious. Wait outside a little while." "I'll talk with Hermione about her timetable, and then we'll all go down to the feast." Because of the peculiar magical dome on the first floor, much of the space on the second floor of Hogwarts had been compressed. There were far fewer rooms with recognizable names than on other levels, and even the number of abandoned classrooms couldn't compare. Dumbledore seemed unusually patient, or perhaps he was choosing his words carefully. Loren wasn't in a hurry either. He walked slowly beside the old headmaster down the second-floor corridor, and an odd silence fell between them. They passed out of the Gryffindor head's office. A few abandoned classrooms down the hall was history of magic. At the mention of Professor Binns, Loren yawned almost automatically from the rigid impression the professor left. Dumbledore chuckled. Actually, Bin's history of magic was very engaging in his earlier years. He could always take events from across the ages and weave them together like a storyteller. Earlier years? Loren tilted his head. How early? Before he died? I don't know precisely. Principal Armando told me so. I never attended Bin's classes back then. Dumbledore smiled and shook his head. By the way, how was Egypt? Babbling said her curse was lifted but refused to explain the details, said it was to protect Miss Granger's secret. It's a long story, Headmaster. You know Professor Babbling's background, don't you? I know a little. Her brother sacrificed his life fighting Death Eaters over a decade ago. After the First War, she came to me seeking help for the curse. Dumbledore's voice took on a faint melancholy. But for such an ancient blood curse, I was powerless. What happened next? They had already passed the History of Magic classroom and reached a stretch of abandoned rooms. Through a half-open door and an unlatched window, wind and rain whispered in from outside. Fortunately, there was no thunder. Dumbledore's eyes lit with memory as he spoke slowly. She later received Sybil's prophecy and returned to ask for confirmation. It was probably a year or two before you and Miss Granger came to Hogwarts. Sybil said a Hogwarts student would meet her in Egypt and help lift the curse. Dumbledore's footsteps were light, and his voice softer still. I expected it would be Harry. You know how special he is, tied to a prophecy even before his birth. After the Philosopher's Stone incident, I thought the student might be you. Ha! Loren shook his head, pride lifting his face. I didn't expect it either, but it turned out to be Hermione. I made no announcement. Dumbledore's smile was faint. Experience teaches that the best way to handle prophecies is often to ignore them. He reached to ruffle Loren's hair, realized the gesture was awkward at his own height, and patted Loren's shoulder instead. Come, tell me of Miss Granger's exploits in Egypt. Loren did not hold back. He told the story of the pyramid, from the strange Sphinx mummy to the peculiar cauldron the goblin manager at Gringotts described as growing brass feet and hopping away. Dumbledore fell into thought, repeating the Sphinx's riddle under his breath. What kind of person always wears a mask, acts mysterious, and tells endless lies? What kind of person always waves a staff, fools subordinates, and is in turn fooled by them? Power, oh power. A peculiar light flashed in Dumbledore's blue eyes. He paused, then laughed outright. What a splendid riddle. If I ever write a book of tales after I retire, that story will certainly be in it. The Tales of Albus the Bard, Loren offered, half teasing. The joke seemed to cast a spell of pure delight over Dumbledore. He laughed until he had to clutch his beard, robe swishing, tears almost at his eyes. When he calmed, he dabbed at the corners of his eyes and smoothed his hair. Loren stood there, a little puzzled at how easily the old headmaster had been amused. Dumbledore, gathering his beard, said, What a charming title. When I write it, I shall ask you to pen the preface. Once you're famous in the wizarding world, The Tales of Albus the Bard will be a bestseller. Is it that funny? Loren asked. Dumbledore bent over his beard, untangling it strand by strand. In my youth, I imagined many futures. Minister for Magic, Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot, changing the world, and then, in the end, he hesitated, perhaps some might call my choice cowardly, but I do not regret it. To me, the Sphinx's riddle sounds like praise. He straightened and shifted the conversation. Did you notice that cauldron? It seemed familiar. Hint, the answer lies in the Tales of Beetle the Bard. Loren's eyes widened, and he snapped his fingers. The hopping pot? A pot with its own consciousness, growing brass feet. Dumbledore pretended to ponder. If nothing unexpected happened, it should be the hopping pot mentioned in Beetle's tales. Loren asked the question he'd been holding in his mind for some time. So the tales of Beetle the Bard aren't mere fiction? The Deathly Hallows are real. The hopping pot is real. You once mentioned the Good Fortune Spring and the Hairy Heart. They're all actual magical artifacts? Not mere trinkets, Dumbledore corrected. Hidden in those tales are deeper secrets. The Hairy Heart symbolizes an immortal Horcrux, and at one time the hopping pot was a source of power. Whoever gathers the Deathly Hallows could possess a power that conquers death. Loren frowned, thinking, could the hopping pot affect Hermione? It's a willful, troublesome object. Did she do the right thing by not taking it? Dumbledore's gaze warmed. Hearing of wonders and dangers, his first concern was not to obtain such objects, but to keep his companions safe. They walked on. Dumbledore's analysis made sense. Loren agreed, but his worry for Hermione remained. He made a silent list of defenses: basilisk venom, the sword of Gryffindor, and if necessary, fiend fire. Dumbledore noticed the grim set to Loren's face and fell quiet, as if sensing his companion wrestling with dark thoughts. They passed a washroom, where Loren and his friends had once repelled a mountain troll on Halloween of their first year. An open window midway down the corridor gave a clear view outside without letting the storm in. Loren's keen eyes caught sight of Dementors floating far off in the sky. He connected the image to the day's events. Bellatrix Lestrange has been on the run for a while, hasn't she? The Ministry must have realized she left the country by now. Why are they still sending people to monitor Harry, and why seal off the school? He added another long-standing question. And what about that senior Ministry official defecting? Someone defected before Voldemort was resurrected. The storm's howl seemed to punctuate the conversation. Dumbledore sighed. About a week ago, someone saw Bellatrix in Hogsmeade. Auror's investigation found that Mr. Ambrose Flume said she vanished into the basement of his shop. Ambrose? The name nudged a memory. Honeydukes? A basement? There's a secret passage from there to the school. Merlin's beard. Have they come into the castle? Loren recalled the Marauders map he'd borrowed to give Hermione a special birthday the previous term. 7 secret passages between Hogwarts and Hogsmeade. Filch guarded 4 entrances. Of the remaining 3, one was behind a 5th-floor mirror, another had the Homping Willow at its entrance, and the last was hidden behind a statue of a hunchbacked, one-eyed witch in the middle of the 4th-floor corridor. Dumbledore glanced at him, amused. Loren gave a sheepish, obedient smile. "I know," Dumbledore murmured. "I didn't expect you to find such a hidden passage either. Even diligent Mr. Filch doesn't know of it, nor did I, though I have lived here for decades." Loren smiled, but the smile didn't reach the worry in his eyes. Dumbledore went on. "The Ministry believes Bellatrix may be hiding in the school or concealed somewhere in Hogsmeade. They imagine she'll lie low, wait until everyone lowers their guard, and then strike at Harry to avenge her master." Loren considered the theory and shook his head. "The Ministry is wasting its time. They think Voldemort is dead, which is why they expect no further schemes. But we know he isn't. Bellatrix and that Ministry official escaped because of Voldemort. She must be with him now." "They could be in Ilvermorny," Dumbledore said. Loren remembered his own agreement with Voldemort from the previous semester, and an eyebrow lifted. For Peter Pettigrew, could Bellatrix be acting on orders to bring that rat to you? Dumbledore hadn't considered it before. "I thought they were after Harry," he admitted. Because of the prophecy, Lily's protection, and Harry's scar, Dumbledore had long believed Harry to be Voldemort's prime focus. He knew of Loren's pact with Voldemort, but had not expected Voldemort to act on it so soon. Loren's voice took on a barely suppressed excitement. "So they might be hiding in the castle." "I don't think so." Dumbledore shook his head gently. "Professor McGonagall and Ministry teams gave the castle a thorough search. Filch and I helped as well. We confirmed there were no hidden occupants. Afterwards, the Ministry deployed Dementors to seal the main avenues so nothing could slip through." Loren pressed his lips together. He didn't entirely trust such searches. Hogwarts had too many secret corners, hidden passages, the Room of Requirement, and even Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets. He ran through their likely combat power. Peter Pettigrew was largely harmless. Bellatrix was dangerous but not invincible. He felt they could be confronted. "Loren." Dumbledore's voice cut through his thoughts. He met Loren's eyes, his own burning with quiet intensity. "When you stare into the abyss, the darkness can rise. Do not let yourself be swallowed." He said no more. Over 2 years of acquaintance, Dumbledore believed he knew Loren well, and he knew, too, that a steadfast companion at Loren's side meant mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Loren did not answer. They kept walking down the corridor. Before them lay the hospital wing. Past Madame Pomfrey's office was Professor McGonagall's office, where they would soon arrive back at their starting point.